Ash was an 8-year-old boy who lived in a small village. One day, he hurried to Father Folk's house to ask whether he could borrow a book. Folk, who had been dozing while seated and was surrounded by numerous books, awoke at the sound of Ash's voice. He asked whether Ash was David's son, and Ash confirmed that he was. Folke then asked what Ash wanted, to which Ash explained that he wished to read a book. Folke glanced at the books scattered around him and noted how dirty they had become from being left unattended. He then asked what Ash intended to do after reading such a book. Ash replied that he read simply for enjoyment. Puzzled, Folke asked what he meant by that, prompting Ash to explain that, given the harshness of their world, reading provided an escape and helped preserve one's sanity. Ash went on to recount an incident from the previous day, when the village chief's wife had invited the children to attend a reading session. It was during that moment that Ash realized how immersing himself in books soothed his heart, and he concluded that, in their empty and unforgiving village, books were truly necessary. Although Folke agreed to lend him a book, he asked whether Ash would be able to read it. Ash admitted that he could not, and instead asked Folke to teach him how to read and write, pointing out that educating others was a priest's duty. He also expressed his wish to become Folke's first student, especially since Folke had been assigned to their village from the royal capital. However, Folke ultimately refused to teach him how to read and write. Ash then requested to borrow an easy book. Folke questioned whether Ash truly understood the value of books and what might happen if he were to ruin or sell one. Ash assured him that he would be careful not to damage it, but he also argued that books naturally wore out over time. Folke conceded that this was true, yet pointed out that books would eventually deteriorate and rot regardless. Ash then asked how long it would take to read all the books in Folke's collection. He suggested that if books were destined to rot when left unread, it might be better for some to suffer damage through use rather than remain untouched. Folke acknowledged that Ash was an exceptionally persuasive speaker. Ash proceeded to ask if he could borrow the books and offered to memorize the letters by himself. Folke replied that remembering them so easily was not feasible. Ash clarified that he did not expect memorizing the letters on his own to be easy. Folke reiterated that it would indeed be difficult, but Ash maintained that he had never claimed otherwise. Instead, Ash requested to borrow the scriptures that Folke often read during festivals, or a textbook that summarized them, or even a book containing sermons. Folke agreed to this request and handed Ash a manuscript he had written himself, assuring him that it would not matter if the manuscript became damaged. Ash thanked Folke and examined the manuscript carefully. He then asked Folke to explain how to read a particular sentence. Folke reminded him that he had said he would memorize it on his own, but Ash insisted that he fully intended to do exactly that. In response, Folke provided the words, invoking the strong wolf god, the wise monkey god, and the fierce dragon god, and asking them to bless the day with their great powers. He stopped afterward, and Ash remarked that these were the familiar holy phrases. Folke acknowledged that he had taught Ash the sentence and told him that he could leave. Ash expressed his gratitude once more and departed from the house. As he walked away, he felt that he had taken the first step toward finding joy in his life. He reflected on his origins in Noskala village, a remote and rural settlement, and recalled fragments of memories from his past life. Those memories were vague and indistinct, to the point that he could no longer remember what kind of person he had once been. However, one thing remained certain. His current life was overwhelmingly inconvenient compared to his previous one. There were no combustion engines, and the village lacked both workhorses and fertilizer. The villagers were forced to labor relentlessly each day simply to survive. Despite being only 8 years old, Ash was already a capable worker. Although everything from his past life felt like a distant dream, he understood that if he stopped working, he would starve. Living in this new world was somewhat entertaining, yet painfully demanding. In his desperate circumstances, Ash felt that he had finally discovered a source of entertainment. He realized that in order to truly enjoy the contents of books, he needed to learn how to read as quickly as possible. After bowing to his parents, he hurried inside the house to practice reading the words Folke had taught him. Although he struggled to break down the sentences at first, he was grateful that they were written using a phonetic alphabet. As he continued reading, he eventually fell asleep. His mother later carried him gently to bed and commented that Ash had been completely absorbed in studying letters all day, clearly showing a strong desire to learn. Ash's father suggested that she should tell him that books were useless and that, as a man, he should focus on tending the fields instead. However, his mother replied that while working the fields was important, the ability to read was valuable as well. She expressed her delight at the thought of Ash enjoying himself through reading in the future. Afterward, Ash returned to Folke and requested to borrow another book. Folka asked whether Ash had already grown tired of reading. Ash replied that he would need only a month to memorize all the letters. Folka voiced his disbelief, insisting that learning the letters in such a short time was impossible. Ash countered by claiming that he had already learned them, which was why he was asking for another book. Folka remained unconvinced and suggested that Ash should at least come up with a more believable lie. Frustrated, Ash asked what Folka would say if he truly had memorized all the letters. Folka responded that such a thing was highly unlikely. Ash proposed that if he could truly remember all the letters, he should be allowed to borrow any book under Folka's supervision. Folka agreed to this condition, but stated that Ash would first have to prove that he had memorized the letters. Ash then asked how he could demonstrate this and requested a pen and paper. Folka asked what he intended to do with them, to which Ash replied that he planned to draft a contract stating that Folka would lend him a book as compensation for calling him a liar. He asked whether Folka thought that was a good idea. Folka questioned why Ash wanted to go that far. Ash explained that while Folka's refusal to lend him books was understandable, being called a liar required an apology, as it had deeply hurt his feelings. He even pretended to be upset, feigning tears. Folka remarked that Ash did not appear hurt at all, but nonetheless handed him the pen and paper. Ash accepted them, commenting that he was not accustomed to using a quill pen and that his handwriting was terrible. After he finished writing the contract, Folka snatched the paper and was astonished to discover that Ash had indeed memorized all the letters within a month. He asked how Ash had managed such a feat, noting that Ash himself could not read properly before. Ash explained that he had memorized the first sentence and then used the letters from it to decipher the rest, guessing the unfamiliar ones as he went. He believed this process proved his claim. For his next book, Ash requested either a religious text or an easy-to-read storybook. He took the books home, where his mother supported his reading habit, though his father scolded him for it. Despite this, Ash continued reading diligently and even borrowed additional books afterward. As winter approached, Ash remarked that the weather was growing colder. Folk agreed and noticed that Ash was carrying several books. He asked whether Ash truly needed so many. Ash replied that he had already read them and would return them once he was finished. Folka marveled at how quickly Ash had gone through the books and at the fact that he had even taught himself how to write. He was deeply impressed, observing that Ash did not seem like an ordinary child. Folk then asked Ash to sit down, explaining that he wanted to discuss something with him. Curious, Ash complied and took a seat. Folk showed him a book and, acknowledging Ash's intelligence, recommended that he read it, mentioning that it was a special volume. Ash hesitated to open the book, noting that the letters were different from the others and far more orderly. Folk asked whether Ash would be able to read it. Ash admitted that he was afraid, as some of the letters were unfamiliar to him, and asked what the book was about. Folka explained that the book was a copy of a manuscript from an ancient civilization. Upon hearing this, Ash appeared uneasy. Folka asked whether Ash had ever read about ancient civilizations before. Ash replied that while he had heard of them, he was not entirely convinced of their existence. He mentioned that there were legends surrounding such civilizations and asked whether the manuscript truly originated from that era. Folka confirmed that the manuscript did indeed originate from an ancient civilization. He explained that he had been attempting to read and understand the book for a long time, conducting research in the royal capital and consulting scholars and experts in the field. Despite investing large sums of money and devoting himself to the manuscript on a daily basis, he had made very little progress. Because he failed to achieve the results expected of him, he was eventually sent to the remote village. Nevertheless, he continued working on the manuscript even after his reassignment. Ash wondered why Folka was so deeply interested in ancient civilizations. Folka admitted that he did not fully understand the source of his fascination, but suspected that his curiosity was similar to Ash's own. They both agreed that despite the difficulties, they would continue their pursuit of knowledge. As they sat together examining the manuscript, Ash expressed his amazement that such a document truly existed, as he had always believed it to be nothing more than a fabricated tale. Folk explained that while some of the stories surrounding ancient civilizations might be fictional, the manuscript itself suggested that these civilizations had indeed been real. Ash then asked whether there was any truth behind the legendary technologies attributed to those civilizations. Folk replied that it was impossible to know for certain, though he remained hopeful. Ash marveled at the idea of a world with advanced technologies, such as food and clothing that could change daily, medicines capable of accelerating healing, lamps that burned brightly without fire, and buildings constructed with sophisticated techniques. He reflected that the life he had only ever dreamed of might once have existed within those ancient civilizations. By studying the ancient language and uncovering their secrets, he hoped to rediscover a rich and prosperous way of life, similar to the one he had known in his past existence. Ash reflected on the possibility that ancient civilizations had truly existed. He remembered several books that described them not merely as myths, but as legends grounded in reality, depicting societies filled with remarkable advancements. The more he considered it, the more plausible it seemed that such civilizations could have once thrived. He reasoned that if these ancient societies could be uncovered through the study and understanding of their forgotten language, then the wealth and knowledge they once possessed might also be recovered. The idea felt almost unbelievable to him, that such prosperity and progress could return to the world. Ash told Folka that he needed to investigate the ancient civilization further. Folka responded by commenting on Ash's reliability and recalling that Ash had previously mentioned similarities among certain letters, which had since been confirmed. He explained that this consensus among researchers suggested that ancient civilizations had been classified into two types: early and late. According to Folka, the characters used by the early civilizations had been passed down to the later ones, and some of those characters had survived into the present day. However, as the writings were transmitted across generations, many characters had been altered and a substantial portion of the text had been lost. He added that the manuscript was believed to originate from an early ancient civilization. Understanding this explanation, Ash realized why he had struggled to read most of the words. He asked for permission to examine the manuscript more closely, and Folk agreed, requesting that Ash inform him if he noticed anything significant. As Ash continued reading, he observed that many letters were missing, making the text difficult to decipher. The sheer number of unknown characters left by the ancients felt overwhelming, and he wondered whether there was any way to decode them. While examining the manuscript, Ash noticed a word that reminded him of a symbol his father used to draw on the ground. His father had once explained that the symbol marked the completion of a task and was an old spell intended to improve the fields. Ash realized that this symbol might resemble the character he was seeing in the manuscript. He speculated that the letters might not represent sounds at all, but instead carry independent meanings, suggesting that they could be ideograms. Ash shared his thoughts with Folka, explaining that the letters in the book did not appear to be traditional letters, but rather images that carried meaning. Folka seemed puzzled by this suggestion. In response, Ash clarified that the characters functioned like pictorial symbols and suggested that they attempt to communicate using this method. He gestured toward Folka, and Folka understood that Ash was indicating him. Ash then pointed to himself and mimed opening and closing his mouth to represent speaking. At that moment, Folka began to grasp what Ash meant by pictorial characters. To further demonstrate his idea, Ash drew a similar symbol on a piece of paper. Folk then realized that Ash was referring to a system of pictorial representation, which helped him better understand the concept of these characters. Ash agreed with Folk's interpretation and pointed to one of Folk's symbols, explaining that it represented him and that the ancient words might contain a significant amount of information. Folk found this notion intriguing and remarked that it would explain the vast number of different characters they had encountered. He added that this discovery meant they had identified at least 3 new characters. Ash agreed and speculated that the ancients may have relied heavily on pictorial symbols. Folka observed that, despite the large number of characters, they appeared to fit together. Although both wondered whether this complexity posed a problem, Folka admitted that it was merely a hunch. Still, he felt that they might have stumbled upon a major discovery. Folk, thrilled by the potential breakthrough, grabbed Ash and expressed his excitement, emphasizing how significant the discovery might be. He was eager to prove their theory, though he clearly needed to calm himself. Ash attempted to reassure him, but Folka's enthusiasm remained unmistakable. Folka praised Ash for his insight, and the two continued discussing the possible implications of their findings. Ash observed that Folka had been studying the ancient language with increasing intensity. Concerned for his well-being, Ash realized that Folka's relentless pace could lead to exhaustion. He decided to keep an eye on him while borrowing books, understanding that merely checking in might not be enough to safeguard Folka's health. Later, as Ash studied alone in his room, he reflected on the low life expectancy in his village. He knew that people lived in constant fear, as even a simple cold could result in death. Because of this, he felt compelled to live in haste, determined to make the most of each day. He read books daily, driven by his ambition to uncover the riches of the ancient civilizations. Although he longed to reach them as soon as possible, he admitted to himself that he had little idea where to find all the knowledge he needed. Suddenly, his father, David, called out to him in an angry and sarcastic tone, asking whether Ash had time to help or whether he intended to grow lazy from excessive reading. David then proceeded to lecture him. Ash replied by asking how he could be of assistance. David explained that a merchant named Quid had arrived to sell his goods and that they were going to sell their surplus wheat harvest. Upon hearing this, Ash was stunned to realize that the time had finally come for Quid's visit. When Quid arrived, David remarked that it seemed unlikely any demons would interrupt him now. Ash greeted Quid and observed that the merchant appeared confident in his ability to avoid trouble. Ash reflected that he had long wondered about the true nature of these so-called demons, whether they were wild beasts, thieves, or something else entirely. Even when he asked others, he received only childish explanations, leaving his curiosity unresolved. David then showed Quid the wheat they intended to sell. After examining it, Quid commented that the winter wheat was of good quality, well packed, and offered to buy it for 4 copper coins. David asked how much that amounted to in iron coins, and Quid replied that it equaled 80 iron coins. David agreed to the price and decided to purchase additional goods, including salt, the usual herbs, grinding stones, and fever reducers. Quid explained that a jar of salt cost 12 iron coins, a set of herbs 15 iron coins, a grinding stone 8 iron coins, and a bottle of fever-reducing pills also 8 iron coins. While reviewing the items, David noticed a different jar and asked about it. Quid informed him that it contained honey wine and was priced at 20 iron coins. David requested a discount, but Quid remarked that David would likely buy it regardless. Ash then pointed out that their mother would be displeased if they failed to buy any clothes. Quid praised Ash for his quick thinking. Ash followed by asking whether Quid could provide 2 extra needles. Quid told him to wait and explained that a piece of cloth cost 10 iron coins, while the 2 needles would cost an additional 6 iron coins. As Ash took the cloth, he remarked that they now had everything they needed. David's attention, however, lingered on the honey wine, prompting him to make another request. Quid agreed to offer a small discount on the wine, on the condition that David not mention it to anyone else. Satisfied with the deal, David shook Quid's hand and praised him, calling him the best merchant around. Ash privately wondered how many times his father would risk provoking their mother. Quid reassured Ash by explaining that the discount was insignificant, only 4 copper coins, and therefore nothing to worry about. Ash clarified that his concern was not about the discount itself, but about the pricing. In response, Quid explained that even if he sold the goods in the city, they would fetch a higher price, which justified offering a discount. Ash then pointed out that Quid had made a miscalculation. Surprised, Quid asked what he meant. Ash observed that Quid appeared unusually quick with his arithmetic and explained that, excluding the alcohol, the total cost came to 59 iron coins. Since the winter wheat alone was worth 80 iron coins, Ash reasoned that even with the original price of the alcohol included, there should have been coins left over. Ash warned that if Quid were attempting to cheat them, he would be forced to report the matter to the church. He added that Priest Foka would undoubtedly inform the entire village, which would bring an end to Quid's business there. Ash went on to explain that mistakes could happen even to skilled merchants. He emphasized that Quid had always treated the village fairly and was known to be trustworthy. Ash stated that he would not mention the error to anyone else, since it had been an honest mistake and humans were naturally prone to such errors. He added that similar situations had occurred in the past with Jewel and Ban the Hunter. Ash's willingness to overlook the miscalculation, he explained, reflected the trust Quid had earned, and he encouraged him to continue upholding that reputation. Quid thanked him and offered a small token of appreciation. He handed Ash a piece of fine fabric and asked whether he liked it. Ash accepted the gift, believing that their agreement was sound and that Quid would remain a reliable merchant as long as fair prices were maintained. David then urged Ash to hurry, and Ash agreed, expressing that he looked forward to doing business with Quid again in the future. After the transaction, Ash went to check on Foka and asked whether he was eating properly. Foka replied with mild sarcasm, asking whether Ash had suddenly become his wife. Taken aback, Ash withdrew slightly, confused by the remark. Folk then explained that Ash's concern for his well-being was excessive and made him seem overly intrusive for a child. Ash responded that if a child felt compelled to worry about an adult, then that adult ought to reflect on his behavior and live up to the responsibilities expected of him. Foka remarked on Ash's smooth way of speaking. Ash then asked Foka whether he had made any progress with reading the ancient texts. Foka replied that he had not deciphered much yet, though he had managed to identify a few names that appeared repeatedly in the manuscript. Ash considered this encouraging and eagerly examined the papers Foka presented. Foka suggested that if these names had been passed down through generations, they might provide clues for deciphering the text. Satisfied with the progress, Ash selected a few books and asked Folk if he could borrow several that day. Folk agreed, noting that it was part of their arrangement. Ash remarked that the agreement was based on an old practice. He decided to take some storybooks and also looked for general education books that could help in the development of the village. With a stack of books in hand, he told Folka that he was heading to the cathedral. As he settled into a quiet spot, Ash reflected on how travel diaries were fascinating, though he noted that there were many technical books and smithing that had been preserved from ancient times. He was particularly interested in a botanical guide and wondered whether it could be useful for learning more about plants. Just then, a girl from the cathedral opened the door and greeted Ash warmly. She thought that the girl was reminded once again of how strange South truly was, a boy who was always unusually calm and far more mature than his age. That was why she felt deeply surprised when she saw him running out of the church with a smile on his face, a smile she had never seen before. The church was meant for study, and Father Folk encouraged that, yet she had never seen anyone studying there because everyone was usually busy with their work. Still, South went to the church every day to study, which made her wonder whether he genuinely enjoyed it. She herself hated studying and could not believe that South might actually like it. The sight of his genuine smile worried her, and she found herself unable to take her eyes off it. Before she even realized what she was doing, she had opened the church door and was standing face to face with Ash. Ash had greeted Micah warmly when she arrived. Micah noticed that he was still engrossed in reading and asked whether he had recently started reading there. He confirmed that he had and explained that he had borrowed the book from Folka. Micah then inquired whether he was enjoying it. Ash agreed and, in turn, asked if she had come to see Folka. When she replied affirmatively, he indicated that Folka was inside and asked if she wanted him to call him. Micah agreed, and Ash went to inform Folka that she had come to see him. Folka, ever the gentleman, asked what had brought her there. Ash reflected on how different Folka's manner was when speaking to others compared to his interactions with him. Micah requested that Folka teach her how to write, explaining that she had been thinking about it. Ash was surprised to learn that Micah, the daughter of the mayor, wanted to learn to read and write. He thought about how the literacy rate in his village was almost zero, except for the mayor's family. Klein, the mayor, was proficient in reading, writing, and calculating, skills that were crucial for managing the village. Ash suspected that Micah's interest in learning might have been inspired by seeing him go to the church, prompting her to pursue education as well. He also remembered how Eureka, the mayor's wife, had been instrumental in awakening his appreciation for books. She had organized reading sessions and given him hope to continue living, and without her influence, he often wondered what might have become of him. Father Folka assured Micah that he would help her with her studies, but noted that he might not always be available due to other responsibilities. He mentioned that Ash, who was of the same age, could also read and write, and suggested that he would be a suitable companion for her. Ash was taken aback and wondered why he had been chosen. Micah agreed to his involvement, and Folka declared that it was settled. Ash was surprised and hoped that at least his opinion would be considered. Folka, however, told Ash to proceed, emphasizing that he was his best student. Though still puzzled by the situation, Ash agreed. Folka then mentioned that he had other matters to attend to and left. Ash suspected that Folka had delegated the task to him as a way of deciphering an ancient language. Micah clasped her hands in a pleading gesture, and seeing this, Ash thought that if she learned to read, he would have a friend to share his reading with, which he anticipated would be enjoyable. He agreed and gathered some books to begin their studies. He showed Micah the book he had started with, explaining that it contained the scriptures used by priest Folka during festivals and ceremonies. Since Micah was already familiar with some of these scriptures, Ash believed it would help her learn more effectively. He then indicated the first book she should start with and pointed it out to her. Micah asked Ash what the first word he had learned was. Ash recited the phrases, "O strong wolf god, wise monkey god, fierce dragon god, grant us your mighty power today as well," and explained that they were from the scriptures, assuming she was already familiar with them. Micah suggested starting from there, and Ash agreed, instructing her to repeat after him. Noticing that Micah seemed lost in thought, he reminded her to focus. He pointed to a section of the book and explained that Shiki, the wolf god, was referenced there. He added that Shiki was known for his strong and healthy body and was prayed to at the birth of a child or during manual labor. Micah then understood the meaning of strong. Ash continued, explaining that the term also referred to having a firm resolve, which he described as being resilient. Micah agreed, and Ash encouraged her to ask questions whenever she was unsure. If needed, they could consult Folka for further clarification together. Micah then inquired about the wise monkey god. Ash explained that wise meant intelligent, and that when studying, they should pray to the monkey god for wisdom. Micah understood and suggested that they go to pray. Ash agreed, thinking it was wonderful that Micah was so engaged. He was pleased that they could continue their studies and felt no shame in learning. They prayed together and then resumed reading, with Micah enjoying the process. As night fell, Folka arrived and remarked that both of them seemed very enthusiastic on their first day. However, he mentioned that it was getting dark and suggested that it was time for them to head home. Ash agreed, and Micah looked outside, commenting that it was quite dark and that she did not like it. Hearing this, Ash offered to walk her home. Micah was surprised, noting that their houses were in different directions, and that he also needed to go home. Ash insisted that he would not leave her alone at night. Folk added that dark areas could be dangerous, and asked Ash to make sure Micah got home safely. Micah hesitated, but Ash encouraged her not to worry. As they walked, Ash apologized for the delay in finishing their study session. Micah replied that it was fine and complimented him on how amazing he was. Despite their similar ages, she marveled at how easily he learned letters and his extensive knowledge. Ash thought it might be because of memories from a past life, but he was unsure what would happen if people knew about them. He decided it was best not to reveal this to her. Not wanting people to think he was unusual or to make a big deal of his past memories, he focused on encouraging Micah. He told her that she was already able to read more words than before, which he found impressive. Micah asked if that was true, but admitted she still did not know all the letters. Ash assured her that if she continued studying at this rate, she would learn them soon and do just fine. Micah, thrilled by Ash's encouragement, did not notice a small stone on the ground and almost tripped. Seeing her stumble, Ash quickly grabbed her hand and asked if she was okay. Micah blushed at the contact and shyly said she was fine. Ash observed that it was darker than he had thought and suggested that they continue holding hands for safety. Feeling embarrassed, Micah asked why. Ash explained that it would be terrible if she got hurt and added that she was a very precious person to him. Micah blushed even more at being called precious. Ash reassured her that she really was very precious and asked if something was wrong, considering that she was the only daughter of the mayor's family. Micah then inquired about the book Ash was holding. He replied that it was about plants and trees. She wondered if it was interesting, and Ash confirmed that it was not only interesting, but also quite helpful. He explained that the book was a guide to various species of plants, detailing which ones were edible and which had medicinal properties. It contained a wealth of practical information about different types of vegetation, helping them identify plants and trees that could improve their food sources or increase their medicinal supplies. Micah was excited and asked if that was really possible, marveling at the book's potential. Ash confirmed that the book was indeed valuable and explained that learning to read it would not only be enjoyable, but also educational. He mentioned that there were many other interesting books at the church and expressed his certainty that Micah would find them enjoyable as well. Micah promised to study hard from then on, and Ash encouraged her to continue working diligently. When they finally reached Micah's home, she thanked him for walking her back. Ash withdrew his hand and assured her that it was no trouble, saying that he should head home and would see her later. Micah agreed, but as he turned to leave, she felt a pang of reluctance at the casual way he had let go of her hand and wished they could have held hands a little longer. Ash, thinking that it was almost time to pick wild plants, decided to check the botanical guidebook to see if there were any interesting plants to look for. The next day, as Ash prepared for his outing, he noticed that the weather was perfect for his task. Having conducted thorough research with the botanical guide, he felt ready to pick wild plants. Other children wondered about Ash's high motivation, and a girl advised the group to stick together, reminding them that bears had been sighted deep in the forest and that they should be cautious not to venture too far. Micah met up with Ash and noted his enthusiasm for the day. Ash confirmed that he had been doing a lot of research with the guide. She asked if he planned to look for plants that could be used for food and medicine, and Ash agreed, explaining that he would start by searching for plants similar to those in the guide. Micah pointed to some grass and asked if he was referring to that. Ash examined it and replied that it did resemble the one in the picture. As Jekyll approached Ash and Micah, he grabbed Ash's hand and asked for his help. Ash looked ahead, thinking he had seen some promising plants in the area, and suggested that they head in that direction, noting that many ferns had grown in that spot the previous year. Someone else also called out to Jekyll for assistance. Micah wished Ash good luck and headed off on her own. Ash reminded her to be careful. As Ash, Jekyll, and another boy continued, Ash noted that many ferns had grown in the area that year and was pleased to find a patch. They began collecting the ferns, and Ash thought it was also important to gather other wild plants. He decided to search for the plants he had seen in the botanical guide. While exploring, Ash spotted a leaf that resembled aloe and recognized it as a useful plant for treating wounds, stomach issues, and skin problems. He recalled that it had been very beneficial in his previous life, and the discovery felt significant to him. However, as he continued forward, he suddenly collapsed and lost consciousness. When Ash woke up, he found himself alone in an unfamiliar part of the forest. He began walking, trying to remember that he had entered the forest to collect herbs. He felt pain in his head and noticed blood, wondering if he had hit it on something. Unable to recall how he had ended up in this situation, Ash realized that he had been wandering alone for some time. Concerned that he might be in danger, he knew he needed to find a way back to the village. Ash thought about his goals, helping Folka decipher the ancient text, assisting Micah with her reading and writing, and finishing the book he wanted to read. He realized he had to return to the village at all costs. Looking north, he spotted the direction toward the town and found that saying it out loud helped clear his mind. He felt confident that he would survive. Noticing that the sun was setting, Ash recognized that attempting to return home in the dark would be even more dangerous. He decided that it would be best to spend the night in the forest. He checked his belongings, the botanical guide, a spare coat, a hand towel, a knife, a backpack, and a flint and steel, and assessed that, with these items, he was relatively well prepared. First, he realized that he needed to light a fire before the sun completely set. He also thought about finding a source of water, knowing that he would need to drink. As he continued searching for herbs, he noticed an aloe plant in a spot that seemed familiar from before he had lost consciousness. He collected some of the aloe and, while doing so, heard the sound of running water nearby. Following the sound, he discovered a river. Ash considered drinking from it, but despite its beauty, he understood that he could not safely drink untreated water from the forest without risking illness. He wished he had a pot to boil the water. Since he did not, he decided it would be better to use it only as a last resort. He then resolved to spend the night there and began gathering sticks and leaves to make a fire. He planned to use the aloe to treat his wounds and his head injury. After successfully lighting the fire, he sat nearby, appreciating the warmth and light it provided. He wrapped some of the aloe in a leaf and applied it to his head wound, and the pain quickly subsided. He then wondered whether the aloe's jelly-like substance might taste like a vegetable or fruit, recalling that raw wild ingredients were often reported to be quite delicious and could help quench thirst. Remembering that he had also found some sari along the way, he washed it and prepared it for cooking. With the fire burning and some food ready, he felt hopeful that he would be able to survive the night. As his stomach growled, Ash found himself craving meat. He hoped that a snake might appear so that he could catch it, cut it up, and drink its blood. Sitting by the fire, he eventually fell asleep. The next morning, he woke feeling exhausted. He decided to harvest more aloe, thinking that if he could not leave the forest, the aloe's water might help him survive, though he still needed proper drinking water to stay energized. While he knew aloe was beneficial for skin and wounds, he also realized that consuming too much could be harmful. He wondered whether there were any other plants with high water content, or if he could find a way to boil the river water. Checking the guidebook, he learned about a paper pot, a pot made from paper but effective for quick use. It would not burn until the water inside was boiling. Ash thought this could be a practical solution. If he could make a paper pot and find leaves to wrap it, it might withstand the fire long enough to boil the water. Determined, he resolved to try making the paper pot and see if it would work. Following his plan, he successfully made the pot and boiled the river water, making it safe to drink. As he drank, he felt a great sense of relief and decided to prepare more water. While considering his next meal, he noticed some fish and felt excited at the prospect of eating them. He readied his basket to catch the fish, reasoning that fish would be safer to eat than plants, provided he had a fire. After successfully catching 2 fish, he was eager to cook them. Using sticks to hold the fish, he placed them near the fire to roast. He thought that if he could stay supplied with food and water, he could avoid starving to death. With food and water in hand, he felt more comfortable and planned to gather more before returning to the village the next day. As the fish roasted, he offered a prayer to God. Just as he was about to eat, he sensed someone approaching from behind. The scene shifted to Folka, where Yuka delivered a box of food and asked if it was sufficient. Folka checked the contents and confirmed that it was very helpful. Yuka remarked on how good it was and noted that Folka had recently been taking care of Micah. As a member of the village's head family, she explained, it was important for Micah to focus on her studies. Yuka then wondered whether Folka's mood had improved since Ash had started visiting. Folka replied that Ash was easy to talk to. Just then, Micah rushed in, crying and calling for her mother. She dropped to her knees, prompting Yuka to ask why she was shouting so loudly and whether she had finished picking wild vegetables. Micah explained that Ash had not returned from the forest. Yuka asked for more details, and Micah recounted that Jekyll had been the first to notice Ash's absence, while others had suggested that Ash might still be somewhere in the forest and encouraged searching further. Micah feared the danger posed by potential bears in the area. They had decided to return to the village to alert the adults. Micah appeared anxious, uncertain what to do, and worried that Ash might have been attacked by a bear. Yuka hugged her, assuring her that everything would be all right and that everyone in the village would search for Ash. Micah continued to cry, fearing that he might not be found. As her sobbing grew louder, Folka told her that crying excessively was futile. He reminded her that if she used up all her tears now, there would be none left when Ash returned. He reassured her that Ash would definitely come back and added that a bear would not be able to harm a demonic boy. The Reaper then grabbed Folka and made him sign a peculiar contract before sending him home. Folka hoped that Micah would save her tears for Ash's return, believing that tears were a powerful weapon for women and that she should show Ash plenty of them. The scene shifted to 3 days later. Ash had returned, but the villagers were still deeply saddened, and even Folka felt the weight of the situation. The search had been called off, and it was difficult to imagine a child in distress still being safe. Yuka told Folka that all the villagers were present and that he should begin Ash's funeral. Folka asked if she was certain, since Ash's death had not been confirmed. Yuka admitted that she shared the same doubts, but despite their extensive search, they had been unable to find Ash. Folk said he would not mind holding the funeral separately if necessary, though he worried about what would happen if Ash returned afterward. Yuka responded that it would be fine if Ash came back, but she asked Folka not to reveal his true feelings, especially to Ash's parents, who were already struggling. Folka found the decision difficult, but he did not feel that Ash was dead. He was confident that Ash would use whatever he had learned from his books to survive. Reflecting on Ash's reading habits, he wondered when Ash would ask for the next book. He told Yuka that they should wait a little longer. Yuka asked if he had a specific reason for wanting to wait. Just then, Ash arrived, hesitantly asking why everyone had gathered. Their shock was palpable upon seeing him. Ash's parents, overwhelmed with emotion, rushed to hug him. Sheila thanked God for Ash's return, while David expressed how much Ash's disappearance had worried everyone. Ash, confused by the commotion, noticed people talking about him and asked what was going on and what they had been planning to do. Folka explained that he had been about to begin Ash's funeral. Ash, shocked, asked why Folka would tell him such a thing and showed some distress, though he noted that it had only been 3 days. Folka laughed at his remark, which took Ash's mother aback, though she tried to remain calm. Micah approached Ash, asking if he was truly himself. Ash confirmed that he was safe and back, even if he was tired. Micah began crying, calling him an idiot and expressing relief that he had returned. Despite her tears, she continued to cry, overjoyed that he was back. Ash apologized for the worry he had caused, but was happy to be safe. Folk praised Ash for his bravery and inquired how he had managed to survive the past 3 days. Ash began to recount his experience, explaining that just as he had been about to eat some fish, a man had appeared. To his surprise, it was Ban. Ban sat with Ash, and when Ash offered him some of the fish, Ban shook his head. Ash was struck by how quiet Ban was. He reflected that Ban was the only hunter in their village who ventured deep into the forests alone, a specialist in navigating the wilderness. Ban was known for his straightforward and blunt demeanor, which made both children and adults view him as somewhat intimidating. Noticing Ash's somber expression, Ban asked what was wrong. Ash apologized and explained that it was unusual for him to be alone in such a place and that he had been in a bit of an emergency. He asked if Ban could take him back to the village. Ban agreed, and Ash thanked him, feeling relieved as he resumed eating the fish, knowing he would be able to return home safely. As Ash talked to Ban, he noticed that Ban seemed to be in a hurry. Ban guided him back to the village, and with his help, Ash eventually arrived. Ash continued his story, mentioning that it had been challenging due to a series of events, but he had managed to complete the wild herb gathering successfully, especially thanks to the aloe. Micah and Yuka glared at Ash, making him feel uneasy. Ash bowed and apologized for causing them trouble. Yuka exclaimed how much everyone had worried about him, and Micah added that she had been scared as well. Ash remained calm, reassuring them that he was back safely. Their reaction was to shout at him for being so composed, which contrasted sharply with the intensity of their emotions. Others in the crowd laughed, and someone commented that it was not as if Ash would actually die even if they had to kill him. Ash asked how anyone could think such a thing, pointing out that if he were killed, he would indeed die. A few days after Ash's return, he reflected on an incident involving Jekyll. He recalled seeing some angry adults scolding Jekyll, who had been with him during the wild herb foraging. Apparently, Jekyll had shoved Ash off a tree as a prank, which had left Ash stranded in the forest. Ban later came to the forest, examined the footprints at the scene, and identified Jekyll as the culprit. Since Ash had made it back to the village safely, he was not too bothered by the incident. However, he noted that pulling excessive pranks on others could lead to serious trouble, and he believed that Jekyll should think twice before attempting such stunts in the future. Initially, Ash had thought the villagers were overreacting by holding a funeral for him, but upon reflection, he realized that if the same situation had happened to someone else, they might not have survived. Aside from this, encountering Ban had proven to be an invaluable experience. Ban was a skilled hunter who single-handedly provided the village with wild game and also protected it from dangerous animals. Ash was particularly impressed to learn that Ban not only knew how to use wild plants, including aloe, but also knew the best spots to gather them. Ash realized that there were many things about wild plants that Ban knew which could not be learned from books alone. With Ban's help, he was confident he could enhance his own botanical knowledge, streamline his research, and develop more effective foods and medicines for the village. He approached Ban and asked if he could become his apprentice. Ban agreed, and they sealed the arrangement with a handshake. Ash expressed his gratitude, officially becoming Ban's apprentice. Following this, Ash's life returned to its normal rhythm. He began assisting Ban and continued his botanical research, focusing first on aloe. Having used it to treat his wounds while stranded in the forest, he found it just as useful as it had been in his past life. Its ready availability also allowed him to experiment freely without worrying about running out. Ash took a rat from a box that had been attempting to escape. Observing the wound where he had applied the aloe, he noted that it was healing more quickly than expected. He concluded that aloe could almost certainly serve as an effective ointment and began to wonder about its other potential applications. He continued to observe the rat's movements, noting that the area where aloe had been applied seemed prone to developing a rash. He speculated that the effects of aloe might vary depending on the quantity applied and the duration of application. As he progressed with his tests and experiments, he gradually improved his workspace. He realized that paper, a quill pen, and ink would be essential for his research. He approached Quid to negotiate for these supplies. When Quid asked what he needed, Ash replied that he wanted a pen and some paper. Quid agreed to provide them. After receiving the items, Ash reflected on the time he had previously approached Quid and noticed that Quid had appeared nervous. It became clear to him that Quid understood his lack of disposable income and had put the cost on his tab, meaning Ash would need to settle the debt eventually. Meanwhile, the rat, named Guinea, had become an invaluable partner in Ash's experiments. Although not a pet, Guinea played a crucial role in testing various medicinal effects. Ash knew he would need to conduct even more experiments in the future and felt that he could not afford to refuse any necessary tests. He wondered if anyone might think he felt bad about using rats in his experiments. In truth, he did not. To him, those rodents were pests. In a world where people constantly struggled to stave off hunger, invasive rodents that devoured crops needed to be tested. If it was for a crucial experiment, he did not mind subjecting them to harsh conditions or force-feeding them excessive amounts of medicine. His hatred for them was so strong that he was numb to their suffering. Thanks to his experiments with Guinea, Ash had gained a thorough understanding of aloe. He was pleased to discover that aloe had a remarkable range of positive effects. Next, he needed to determine whether these beneficial effects would translate to humans in the same way. He decided it was time to start experimenting on himself, beginning with aloe's curative properties. He applied aloe salve to one of his hands and waited to see the results. He was amazed by the difference it made. The salve visibly healed the cracks and hangnails on his hand, and he could hardly believe the extent of the improvement. Ash was pleased to see the positive results of aloe on human skin, even though he had tested it on Guinea beforehand. Just then, Sheila, his mother, came to ask for his help in collecting water. Ash agreed, and she handed him a bucket with a grateful smile. She noticed that one of Ash's hands was now remarkably clean and smooth, a stark contrast to its previously rough state. Ash explained that he had been testing aloe as a topical ointment and was thrilled to see its effectiveness. Sheila, amazed, asked if there was really an ointment that could make skin so smooth and silky. She then inquired if he had any left. Ash confirmed that he did and mentioned that he planned to make more once it was finished. Sheila took his hand and asked if she could use the ointment. Ash agreed, but warned her that while it had worked well for him, it might not suit everyone's skin. He advised her to stop using it if she experienced any pain or itching. She agreed and asked if she could apply it immediately. Ash handed her the ointment, and as she applied it, she commented on how amazing it felt. She hoped it would make her hands as smooth as his and thanked him. Ash was surprised by how much Sheila appreciated the ointment. He decided that he should make a larger batch for her and wondered if others in the village might be interested as well, not just women, but also men and children. He noted that many villagers had rough hands, and he hoped that something as simple as this could improve their quality of life. Ash found that the aloe salve was highly effective, and it did not take long for his mother's rough hands to heal. He noticed that the positive results drew more interest than he had expected. When he met Micah, she was astonished to see how clean his hands had become and expressed curiosity about the medicine that had made his skin smooth. Ash then offered Micah and Yukiya a chance to try the salve as well, although he mentioned that it was still a work in progress. Both eagerly agreed to cooperate. Ash felt confident that distributing the salve locally would significantly improve the villagers' quality of life. However, seeing how appealing the salve was, he thought there could be even greater potential and wondered if people might be willing to pay for it, contemplating conducting some test marketing in the city. Drawing on the knowledge he had gained from various books, Ash decided to seek out even more information. While he was engrossed in a particularly challenging book, Micah approached him and remarked on the difficulty of his reading material, asking what he was currently studying. He showed her the name of the book and encouraged her to pronounce it herself. She tried and successfully identified it as the Livestock Manual. Ash appreciated how much her reading skills had improved. Micah was pleased to hear this and asked if the manual covered livestock such as horses and cows, to which he confirmed, explaining that the term livestock referred to animals that could be raised and kept for various purposes. Micah inquired whether the manual included information on meat production, and Ash confirmed that it did. He mentioned that if the aloe salve proved successful, he hoped to use the proceeds to start something new in the village. However, his research had indicated that raising livestock was challenging and required a substantial income. He considered the need for expertise in animal husbandry, stables, an initial breeding pair of animals, and a long list of necessary expenses. Although chickens were relatively easy to raise, Ash noted that their clucking could attract wolves and demons from the forest, making it difficult to keep them in an isolated farming village. His research had also revealed that demons were distinctly different from ordinary dangerous animals like wolves. From what he remembered, folklore suggested that a demon raid had once destroyed an ancient civilization. Ash wondered what demons were truly like and what challenges they might pose. He told Micah that he should focus on purchasing iron farming tools, or perhaps something else useful, as he was still weighing his options. Micah exclaimed that he was amazing, and he replied modestly that he had not accomplished anything significant yet. She insisted that this was not true, praising the aloe salve for making her hands look and feel so nice and clean. Ash examined her hands and noted that there were no adverse reactions such as rashes or swelling. He asked Micah how she felt after using the salve and whether she had experienced any pain or itchiness. While examining her hand, Micah felt an unusual sensation, prompting Ash to quickly withdraw his hand and apologize for touching her, acknowledging that it had been a serious breach of etiquette. Micah reassured him that it was fine and that he need not worry. Ash reflected that, despite her youth, she deserved to be treated with the utmost respect. Micah confirmed that she felt no pain or itchiness, and that the salve had indeed made her skin wonderfully smooth. Ash responded that this was good news, and mentioned that Yukiya had not had any issues with the salve either. Micah added that her mother was also very pleased with the results. Ash was glad to hear this, and suggested that they start studying, to which Micah agreed, and they continued their studies. Meanwhile, Yukiya was astonished by Ash's creation of a new type of medicine. She realized that he had effectively rediscovered technology from ancient civilizations, something typically reserved for researchers affiliated with the church, specifically those in the capital, rather than just any local temple. She could hardly believe that Ash had accomplished so much. It seemed almost like an elaborate joke, but the effects of the salve were undeniably real. The villagers had never had a specialized product to their name before, but now they possessed a new item that did not even exist in the capital. They had always tried to make the best of their extremely limited resources, wondering if they could leave a legacy for the next generation. Suddenly, they had gained a remarkable new resource, which was both incredible and perplexing. The medicine was bound to attract attention, potentially drawing those who disapproved of Ash's extraordinary achievement. Yukiya realized that she needed to take action to protect Ash and the villagers. She planned to invite Ash for dinner so they could discuss the medicine and consider what measures should be taken. She also wanted to understand Ash's own intentions and determine whether this breakthrough could be a major turning point for the village. When Ash arrived at Yukiya's house, he found it hard to believe that he was being invited for dinner as a thank you for the Aloe Salve. He knocked on the door and greeted them, saying good evening. Micah opened the door and welcomed him warmly. Ash thanked her for the invitation and remarked that she looked even more splendid than usual, noting that the dress she was wearing suited her perfectly. She thanked him for the compliment and responded in kind, saying that Ash also looked well. Ash thanked her again, thinking that Micah's efforts to greet guests and show them inside must be quite taxing, even though he was just an ordinary visitor. He also recalled that his own parents had been unusually on edge at home, even insisting that he wear his best clothes. Yukiya approached Ash and commented that he looked very much like a gentleman, and Ash responded, feeling honored by the compliment. Yukiya then invited him inside, encouraging him to make himself at home. Klein, the chief, also extended a warm welcome to Ash. As Ash, Klein, and Micah sat down for the meal, Yukiya stood by and announced that, with their guest present, they could begin dinner. Ash was delighted by the meal, and Yukiya urged him to eat before it grew cold. He agreed and ate delicately, prompting Yukiya to remark on his excellent table manners and how much of a gentleman he was. Ash replied that everyone there was very neat and that he was merely following their example, noting that he was not usually so meticulous but had lost control for a moment. He praised the food, complimenting Yukiya's cooking and expressing envy for her husband. Realizing he was too young to make such a comment, he quickly felt embarrassed. Yukiya, flattered by the praise, asked Klein if he had heard Ash's compliment. Ash thought to himself that despite his envy of Klein, Yukiya truly seemed to be the most elegant and refined woman in the village. It made perfect sense to Ash that Yukiya was so elegant and refined, as she had not originally been from the village. She had been born and raised as the daughter of an influential family in the capital. The story went that when Klein had gone to the capital to begin his apprenticeship, he and Yukiya had fallen madly in love. He had taken her hand in marriage, and although there were tales of heroism associated with their romance, Ash had never heard the full details. After dinner, Ash thanked Yukiya for the wonderful meal. She was pleased that he had enjoyed it and mentioned that she wanted to ask him a few questions if he didn't mind. Ash assured her that he would be happy to answer. Yukiya explained that her questions concerned the Aloe Salve and mentioned that she had heard he was considering selling it through Quid. Ash confirmed that he was still only considering that option at the moment. Yukiya expressed some concern, noting that while she was confident the medicine would sell well and bring substantial profits to Ash's family, she worried about the potential for him to stand out among the villagers. Ash replied that such a stark divide in wealth could indeed lead to discord among them. Yukiya mentioned that Micah had often spoken of Ash's advanced vocabulary and then asked if he had received such an education from a distinguished teacher. Ash agreed, noting that he had been the top disciple of Folka, though he thought to himself that Folka had barely taught him anything. It was, however, a convenient excuse in situations like this. Yukiya expressed her confidence that Folka would be proud of Ash's accomplishments and acknowledged that Ash's learning had made their conversation much smoother. After discussing matters with Klein, she believed that Ash's intentions were commendable but suggested that, to avoid any future issues, they collaborate on a plan. Ash thanked her for her guidance, admitting that he had nearly caused significant trouble for the village. He realized he had not considered the broader implications of his actions and acknowledged that his original plan had not included excessive personal spending. He knew he needed to amass a substantial amount of money, but worried that doing so could provoke jealousy among the villagers. He noted that purchasing new items for the village was expensive and that he needed to save up for them, though saving money could also bring complications. He pondered what the best course of action might be. Suddenly Micah shouted for Yukiya to stop bullying Ash. Ash thought that Yukiya was not bullying him, but rather being exceptionally kind. Yukiya, with a playful smile that carried a hint of mischief, asked Micah if she dared to defy her own mother. The smile looked surprisingly charming, adding to her appeal. Micah responded that if Yukiya was going to be mean to Ash, she would make Yukiya pay for it, even though Yukiya was her mother. Yukiya was curious about why Micah was so protective and wondered if Ash was causing trouble. Ash realized that if Yukiya had not intervened, he might have jeopardized his relationship with the villagers, and he could not deny the truth of what Yukiya was saying. Micah insisted that it was true, explaining that Ash was saving money for the village to buy livestock and farming tools, and had been working hard to determine what would benefit everyone the most. Yukiya was surprised by this revelation. Micah affirmed it once more, praising Ash as someone who always thought about the village and was genuinely a good person. Smiling, Yukiya asked if Ash was also very handsome and lovely. Micah shouted an enthusiastic yes. Ash, caught off guard by the assertive compliment, blushed. Seeing this, Micah blushed as well, prompting Klein to lift her up gently. Ash then asked Yukiya if they were putting on some sort of act, but Yukiya denied it, explaining that Micah was simply adorable when she reacted like that. Afterwards, Yukiya sat down with Ash to discuss his plans and asked if he truly intended to use the profits from the medicine as he had described. Ash confirmed that he did, explaining that life in the village was challenging and that he wanted to alleviate those difficulties as much as possible. Yukiya understood why Ash needed livestock and tools and wondered if addressing food issues with purchases from Quid would be sufficient. Ash acknowledged that it would probably provide some relief, but only for him and his family, which would not be enough. Compared to the abundant splendors he had seen in his past life memories, his current resources felt inadequate. He did not need the very best, he simply wanted to establish a standard that was sorely lacking. Ash recognized that achieving such a goal was like something out of a fantasy and might be beyond his reach in his lifetime. However, he was determined to make even a fraction of that dream come true. He knew he would need to rely on society as a whole. If he could not accomplish it alone, he would enlist the help of 100 people and, if necessary, increase that number. To make his vision a reality, he would require resources for 10,000 people. Even though the dream might seem impossible, he remained committed to trying. He told Yukiya that he would not be satisfied with merely making life easier for his own family. Everyone's happiness was his happiness, and he was not trying to act like a saint, but was genuinely committed to making others happy as well. Yukiya wondered what luxuries he was referring to, and Ash explained that he had a dream, an ordinary one really. He wanted to lead a life depicted in books, a rich life full of conveniences, reminiscent of the legendary ancient civilizations. He found himself longing for those modern amenities, imagining how delightful it would be to have them. He realized that he was still unfamiliar with the details, such as the designs or applications of these innovations, and thought that discovering and creating them alone would be far too ambitious. He would need many capable collaborators. Remembering Yukiya's earlier offer of assistance, he decided to accept her help, hoping that with such support, he could continue pursuing his ambitious dream at a steady pace. He suggested that, since he would be donating the proceeds to the village, Yukiya should assist him with his business plan for the Aloe Salve. Yukiya responded that he was even more intriguing than Micah had described, though perhaps a bit intimidating as well. Ash apologized for his eccentricity, assuring her that he was more of a sheepish lad than a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that he was sincere about his intentions. Yukiya expressed her gratitude, saying she was honored to have the opportunity to assist with the business plan for such a generous cause, and that it would be her pleasure to help. As they shook hands, Ash acknowledged that it was his pleasure to receive her support, and was thrilled to have her help. With his case now presented to the village chief's family, he anticipated smoother dealings with Quid and hoped to leverage their connections in the city. Ash planned to share his salve recipe with Yukiya and leave the sales and distribution to her, content with earning just a modest profit if it meant improving the village's quality of life. This marked his first major step toward his goal, and he was determined to read extensively, progressing one step at a time until he achieved the lifestyle of his dreams. The next afternoon, Ash visited Yukiya to give her the recipe for the salve they had discussed earlier. She thanked him, saying that she had been eagerly anticipating it. She read through the instructions and noted that the process was more complex than she had initially thought, but she felt confident that she could make it if she had the right ingredients. Ash mentioned that he would like to be informed if she managed to produce a batch. He then gave her some ingredients to get started, explaining that he had collected them during his recent trip to the forest with Ban. He admitted that he wasn't very business savvy and would rely on her to handle selling and pricing the salve, requesting only that she give him the bare minimum for his share of the proceeds. Yukiya asked if he was sure about this arrangement, noting that since the medicine was his invention, it felt wrong for her to take control. Ash explained that he had asked her for help because he couldn't manage everything on his own and acknowledged that there were many aspects he wouldn't consider by himself. He expressed his faith in her abilities and said he would be glad to have her take charge, assuring her that he would do everything he could to support her. She agreed with the plan and stepped out of her home with Ash. Yukiya mentioned that she would try to develop a sales plan, and Ash expressed his appreciation for her willingness. She also noted that she intended to make the salve a few times to determine how much the ingredients would yield. Remembering that Micah seemed interested in helping, Yukiya considered enlisting her assistance. Ash agreed that it was a good idea, observing that Micah was capable of reading the recipe as well. Yukiya added that Ash had been a key reason Micah had learned to read and write, but Ash downplayed his role, saying that it had been Micah's own motivation that had driven her progress. Yukiya found Ash to be quite an interesting person, but realized that he hadn't fully grasped why Micah had been so motivated. She then mentioned that she would send some salve to her parents in the city via courier once she had prepared a sufficient amount, and asked Ash for his opinion. He responded that it was an excellent idea and told her to proceed as she saw fit. She agreed to take care of it and promised to update him on her progress. Ash thanked her and said he looked forward to hearing about it. After bowing, he left, feeling confident that Yukiya would manage the aloe salve for a while. He decided to focus on other endeavors and considered beginning research on a rodenticide to protect the stock in the storehouse from rats. As time passed, Ash received word from Yukiya that the aloe salve was selling well and that his share of the profits had amounted to a whole copper piece. Yukiya reported that she had begun selling the medicine in the capital's upper-class district, where her parents lived, and that it had become a rare and exclusive item with a hefty price tag. Ash was astonished that his initial share had turned out to be so substantial, as that single copper piece alone was enough to cover a quarter of the year's winter wheat expenses. Since Yukiya was handling the business and enjoying it, Ash felt that he could finally repay Quid for the quill and paper Quid had given him. When Ash tried to repay Quid, Quid refused to accept the money, insisting that Ash should keep it for himself and that he wouldn't take it under any circumstances. Ash realized that selling the salve had opened doors to dealing with wealthy families and had provided him with a significant advantage and a promising business opportunity. According to Quid, this was a positive outcome and a testament to Ash's efforts, and Quid assured him that it was all thanks to him and that he could still count on Quid visiting the village, which made for a beautiful relationship. Ash then explained to Folka that he couldn't convince Quid to accept the money and, since bringing it home would only result in his father using it for beer, he asked Folka to hold on to it for him. Folka replied that handling such money wasn't part of the church's business, to which Ash suggested calling it a donation instead, noting that Folka could withdraw it whenever he wanted. Folka countered that it would be more like a deposit than a donation, and expressed concern that he might end up keeping it for himself, given his wavering morality. Ash, noting Folka's clerical demeanor, suggested that if Folka couldn't hold the money, they could use it as a mutual research fund so that both could benefit from it, provided it was used for ancient language research. Folk responded that the idea sounded interesting, and Ash agreed, noting that research could indeed be costly. At that moment, Micah knocked on the door, asking if Ash was there, as she had heard his voice. Folka welcomed her in and suggested that Ash help Micah with her studies. Ash asked Folka how he felt about this arrangement, sensing a certain expectation from him. Folka replied that he trusted Ash to handle the matter effectively. Ash and Micah then left the room. Ash commented on how hopeless Folka seemed, and Micah expressed her gratitude, mentioning that her mother wanted to produce more of the aloe salve since it was selling so well. Yukiya had even suggested involving other villagers to help, so Micah asked Ash how he felt about it. Ash replied that as long as Tuji was fine with it, he had no objections. Micah said she would inform her mother that Ash had approved the plan. They then sat down to study, and Ash apologized for being the messenger. Micah assured him that it was fine, as she was happy to help and appreciated the effort. After their study session, Ash and Micah went to Micah's house, where Yukiya and a few villagers had gathered. Yukiya thanked everyone for assisting with the village's new industry. She first gathered them to make a batch of the aloe salve together and explained the process once more, and they all agreed to the plan. Ash thought that Yukiya had wisely decided to increase production, as making the salve was a manual process and naturally required additional help. Yukiya ended up hiring villagers who were struggling financially the most, widows or caregivers for sick family members, women who were not suited for heavy labor. Given their difficult circumstances, other villagers had no reason to complain about not being hired, which Ash considered an ingenious management strategy. He reflected that while Folka was a great academic scholar, Yukiya demonstrated exceptional skills as a business manager. As the first step toward achieving their goal, they held a practice session. Noting that none of the new recruits were literate, they planned to distribute the recipe and teach them to read simultaneously. Ash saw Tanya and began teaching her how to safely remove the spines from the aloe, demonstrating the proper technique and advising her to be cautious. Tanya thanked him, and he told her not to mention it. He then asked if she preferred to be called Phil Tanya or just Tanya. She said she preferred Tanya, as that was what everyone else called her. Ash agreed and told her to ask for help if she found any part of the process confusing. Tanya admitted that she couldn't read and was struggling to understand the instructions, and Ash assured her that he would explain how to read the recipe slowly as they went through it. Tanya agreed and noticed Micah teaching another girl at the same time. Curious, she asked Ash how he and Micah had learned to read and write. Ash explained that they had studied together at the church. Tanya pointed to some words on the recipe and asked what they meant. Ash replied that the words explained how to make aloe salve, with each step of the process listed underneath. He guided her through the first step, removing the spines, followed by peeling the skin, and continued until she successfully completed the process. Yukiya appreciated everyone's work and, with a bit of practice, felt confident that they would be able to make the salve reliably. The batch they made that day was a test batch, and Yukiya encouraged everyone to try it on themselves to test its effectiveness, claiming it would cure blemishes and make their skin extremely clear. Tanya took a bit of the final product and examined it, noting that it reminded her of something similar her mother used to make. Ash noticed her reaction and asked her to elaborate, curious about what her mother had made. Tanya explained that her mother used to prepare a medicine applied in a similar way, both as an ointment for wounds and for rough skin. She thought it was more of a medicinal treatment for tough skin, but agreed that it was quite similar to the aloe salve. Ash asked Tanya if she remembered the ingredients her mother had used. Tanya recalled that her mother used honeycomb, not honey, explaining that the honeycomb itself was used while honey was reserved for cooking and other purposes. She also remembered her mother adding other ingredients to the mixture, but couldn't recall what they were. Ash wondered why honeycomb was used and what it was made of, realizing he didn't know much about its composition. He speculated that honeycomb might be as valuable as honey, a remarkable product that bees put extra effort into creating, and his curiosity about the specifics of the medicine grew. He knew that Tanya's mother could have provided answers, but both of her parents were no longer alive, which was why Yukiya had invited Tanya to assist. Tanya's father had been the village's sole beekeeper, and after his death, her mother had taken over the beekeeping duties until she too passed away. They had left behind their children, Tanya and her younger brother Jiggle, neither of whom had learned much about their parents' trade. Ash reflected on the harsh environment of the farming village and considered that the knowledge and techniques they possessed, remnants of ancient civilizations, might eventually fade into obscurity, drifting away like leaves in the wind. Tanya apologized for not remembering any of the details and said she now wished she had helped with beekeeping a bit more. Ash told her not to worry, saying that she hadn't done anything wrong. He explained that the honey was so delicious and rich in nutritional value that learning about the use of honeycomb had sparked his interest in beekeeping. Yukiya mentioned that beekeeping was an essential industry for any farming village. Ash asked if she agreed, and she confirmed, noting that when Tanya's family had been raising bees, they not only produced honey but also made candles, which benefited the village. Ash expressed excitement at the idea of the candles and then asked Yukiya if, while they might have enough to buy livestock, they could also explore beekeeping. Yukiya agreed, saying she'd been thinking the same thing. Ash said that their next step toward improving the quality of life in the village was to research beekeeping, and Yukiya replied that she could count on him for that. Ash noted that the only problem was he hadn't seen any books about beekeeping at the church and needed to find one first. Until then, he felt like a helpless child. Yukiya commented that helpless sounded like an exaggeration, though they were still far from taking their first step. As Tanya glanced at them, she mentioned that her father had a treasured book with a picture of a honeybee on the cover, which might be useful for Ash. Ash was astonished and asked whether it was true, struggling to believe that books existed outside churches. He then requested permission to read them. Tanya agreed, and Ash thanked her, urging her to hurry. She hesitated, explaining that her house was currently a mess. Ash reassured her not to worry, but she remained uncertain. Eventually, he managed to persuade her. Soon after, Yukiya and Micah arrived. Yukiya remarked that Ash was being too hard on Tanya and was making her nervous. She suggested postponing the matter, and Micah agreed. Ash acknowledged their concern and proposed reading the book outside instead. Tanya asked where outside, and Ash suggested sitting just outside her house. Tanya observed that Ash seemed extremely eager to read, which he readily confirmed. Everyone was surprised by Ash's insistence. Ash then asked whether there was no other option, and what he would need to do to obtain her permission, promising to do anything for the book. Tanya finally agreed to give him the book immediately. Ash thanked her, excused himself from the others, and rushed out of the house, urging Tanya to hurry. She asked him to slow down, while Micah followed after them. A lady later commented that she had always considered Ash a reserved and quiet boy, and Yukiya agreed, noting that everyone else shared the same impression. When they arrived at Tanya's house, Ash and Micah waited outside, while Tanya went inside to fetch the book. Once Ash began reading practical beekeeping techniques, he eagerly absorbed information about various types of honeybees suitable for beekeeping, their ideal temperatures, active ranges, handling methods, honey collection, hive maintenance, and the processing of raw honey. He was astonished by the depth of the material, which far exceeded his expectations. Ash reflected that although many of the techniques appeared to originate from later period ancient civilizations, it was remarkable that such detailed knowledge had been preserved, even if it was no longer commonly referenced in modern writing. He reasoned that the meticulous explanations suggested the book drew heavily from the expertise of those later civilizations. He found it difficult to imagine anyone in the modern era being able to write with such precision and detail, which strengthened his belief that the book was indeed a product of a later period civilization. To Ash, the book itself felt like an archaeological artifact, and he was amazed that such a valuable relic could be found in such a small village. Micah eventually joined him and remarked that they had discussed bees enough for the moment. Ash agreed, acknowledging the book's magnificence and noting that he would need to study it more carefully to grasp all the details. Nevertheless, he concluded that with this book, they should be able to begin a beekeeping business. Tanya then reflected on the book's significance and wondered whether she might be allowed to read it as well. Ash asked how her father had come to possess such a book. Tanya explained that her father had told her it was a family heirloom. According to the story passed down through generations, their ancestors had begun beekeeping because of this very book, although the circumstances under which it had been acquired remained unclear. The family had once been renowned for their beekeeping skills, even beyond the village. Over time, the book had been preserved as a precious heirloom, or so the story claimed. Tanya added that since the account had been transmitted orally, it should be taken with a grain of salt. Ash reassured Tanya that he believed her family's story to be true. He speculated that her ancestors must have been able to read the book and had likely learned from its highly advanced beekeeping techniques. Given that the book appeared to originate from a bygone era and possessed immense value in its own right, he remarked that it would not be an exaggeration to regard it as a genuine treasure. Tanya appeared unsettled by this assessment and commented that it was merely something they had kept around the house. She admitted that she was surprised her family owned such a remarkable book. Ash agreed, stating that it was indeed a fine heirloom and expressing his certainty that Tanya's ancestors had guarded it carefully in order to pass it down through the generations. He wondered how many years the book, silent yet wise, had lain dormant in her family's possession. It seemed likely that a long time had passed since the family had last made use of it, and yet the heirloom had never left their care. Despite countless difficulties, they had gone to great lengths to protect a book they themselves could no longer read. Although the descendants may have lost touch with their ancestors' beekeeping knowledge, that knowledge had now, at last, been rediscovered. Ash sensed a quiet determination within the book's pages and reflected on the courage of its authors, who had struggled to preserve their knowledge against the ravages of time. He told Tanya that the book stood as a testament to what her ancestors and parents had protected, ensuring that their beekeeping techniques would endure across generations. He encouraged her to continue that legacy. Tanya wondered aloud whether she herself could become a beekeeper, though she admitted uncertainty about her ability to understand the book. Ash reassured her that he could help explain its contents and that they could learn together, emphasizing that the decision to reclaim those lost skills ultimately rested with her. Tanya responded that becoming a beekeeper had been her dream for a long time. She explained that she had admired her parents' work since childhood and had always wished to follow in their footsteps. However, before she had the chance to learn from them, her parents had passed away. The book they left behind had been too difficult for her to comprehend on her own, which had led her to abandon the effort and focus instead on mere survival. Now, she said, she was determined to try again and honor her parents' legacy. Ash assured her that it would be his pleasure to study beekeeping using the methods her ancestors had safeguarded for centuries. Tanya agreed with enthusiasm. Ash felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her family's long struggle against time was finally being rewarded, and that a body of knowledge once on the verge of being lost forever was now in capable hands. Ash informed Tanya that a great deal of work lay ahead. He explained that he would need to read through the book quickly in order to understand how to begin the beekeeping process, especially given the era in which it had been written. He added that the book might also prove valuable for his research into ancient languages, which was why he intended to ask Father Foka to examine it. Ash then asked Tanya whether she would mind lending him the book and allowing it to be kept at the church for the time being. He explained that the priest there was a knowledgeable archivist who could read the text and that Foka would also be able to help prevent any further deterioration of the book. Tanya agreed, but only after Ash promised to take good care of it. Ash reassured her, declaring that he would ensure anyone who dared to mistreat the book would face serious consequences. At this, both Micah and Tanya reacted with alarm and urged him to stop speaking so dramatically. Meanwhile, Jekyll, who had been watching from behind a tree, felt furious with Ash for taking Micah and his sister, Tanya. As Ash walked back with Micah, he remarked on how remarkable the day had been and suggested that they take the book to the church. He then asked Micah whether she could pass along a message to Yukiya. Micah agreed, and Ash instructed her to tell Yukiya that they might soon be able to begin beekeeping, with Tanya leading the effort, and that this was all she needed to convey. Micah then asked whether she might read the book together with him. Ash agreed, noting that although much of its content was complex, he was confident that they would enjoy studying it. Just then, Jekyll emerged with two companions and called out to Ash, asking him to come over. Ash bowed apologetically and explained that he needed to deliver an important book to the church, adding that he would be glad to visit another time. He then turned to Micah and urged her to hurry, so the book would not be exposed to the open air for too long. Jekyll shouted after them, accusing Ash of being a coward. Ash chose not to respond. Micah asked whether Ash intended to let Jekyll speak to him that way, and said she was ready to confront him herself. Ash urged her not to let it trouble her, and insisted that they keep moving. He then took her hand to hasten her along, which caused her to blush. This gesture further enraged Jekyll, who shouted that he had had enough and hurled a stone at Ash. Ash avoided it with ease. Jekyll mocked him, claiming that Ash believed himself important merely because he had created some skin medicine and threatened that he would not miss with his next throw. Micah cried out that Jekyll was going too far. Ash instructed Micah to take the book and step back to ensure her safety. She agreed and took the book from him. Ash then stepped forward to face Jekyll directly. When Jekyll demanded to know whether Ash had anything to say, Ash warned him that damaging the book would be treated as a declaration of war. He stated that, should that occur, he would launch a full assault using every means and weapon at his disposal. Ash further vowed that if Jekyll threw another stone, he would devote every waking moment to making him pay for it. Intimidated by Ash's fierce demeanor, Jekyll looked at him with fear before turning to Micah and asking whether she had been hurt. Micah assured him that she was fine. She then thanked Ash for protecting her and reiterated that she had not been injured. Ash replied simply that he had done what was necessary and urged her to keep moving. Later that night, Micah recounted the incident involving Jekyll and his friends to her mother. She explained that they had hurled insults at Ash and had even thrown stones at them. She admitted that what affected her most was the moment Ash had stepped in front of her to shield her from danger. Yukiya listened carefully and understood Micah's growing admiration for Ash. Yukiya remarked that it would not be long before others began to take notice of Ash, both in positive and negative ways. She explained that in the future, Micah would encounter many people who disliked Ash, much like Jekyll and his companions. Yukiya spoke of how remarkable Ash was, pointing out that he had learned to read and write, invented new medicines, and accomplished feats at a pace that even adults found extraordinary. She expressed confidence that Ash would go on to achieve even greater things and believed it was only a matter of time before he left the village to make a name for himself. Finally, Yukiya cautioned Micah that talented individuals often attract attention from all kinds of people. While some of that attention would be supportive, not all of it would be kind. She warned that many would feel jealous or attempt to undermine Ash's achievements, either by claiming credit for his work or by trying to harm him. Micah reflected that everyone ought to cherish Ash, though she understood that such an ideal was unlikely. As the only daughter of the village chief, she was keenly aware of how people often viewed those in positions of privilege. She told Yukiya that she understood what she was trying to convey. Yukiya, speaking as Micah's mother, felt a twinge of shame that her daughter had been forced to voice such concerns. Nevertheless, she recognized that Micah's ability to articulate these thoughts demonstrated maturity, strength, and the capacity to support Ash. Yukiya encouraged Micah to gather people who would stand by Ash and to drive away those who wished him harm. She urged her to protect Ash and to support him in pursuing his passions. Micah then wondered about the weight of such responsibility. Protecting someone as intelligent and dependable as Ash, who was always studying and shone like a distant star, she questioned whether she could truly be the one to shield him. Yukiya reassured her that although the task might seem daunting now, Micah was precisely the kind of person Ash would need. She expressed her belief that, in time, Micah would be able to support Ash's ambitions and stand firmly at his side. Micah replied that she was uncertain whether she could live up to those expectations, but that she would try because her mother believed in her. Yukia gently patted Micah on the head, expressing her confidence in her daughter's abilities and promising to teach her everything she could to help ensure her success. In response, Micah resolved to follow Ash's path, vowing to do her utmost despite the difficulties ahead and swearing to protect him no matter what. They learned the basic processes of beekeeping and began identifying and preparing the tools needed for the upcoming harvest season. As they continued with their routine, Ash, Micah, and Tanya discussed their next steps. Ash pointed out that placing hive boxes in an area rich in flowers would allow honeybees to collect pollen more easily. However, he observed that there did not seem to be many ideal locations within the village itself. His initial idea was to place the hives near the village farmland. He reasoned that this would also benefit the crops, as the bees would help with pollination, potentially leading to a larger harvest of vegetables and native wild strawberries. Ash also considered the forest as another possible location. Tanya agreed that his thinking was sound and mentioned that her father used to take hive boxes into the forest each season. However, she explained that her mother never accompanied him because the deeper parts of the forest were too dangerous, even for experienced men. This was why her father had always been cautious about expanding his beekeeping efforts in the forest. Ash agreed with Tanya, acknowledging that the forest could indeed be dangerous, even for experts. He felt that if they chose the forest, finding a suitable and safe location for the hives might prove difficult. Although Ash had been venturing into the forest more often since he began apprenticing under Ban, Tanya did not have to travel far before encountering areas without clear paths. Ash recalled how his heart had raced when he once slipped along a forest trail. Considering Ban's extensive knowledge of the forest, Ash believed that Ban might know of relatively safe locations suitable for beekeeping and resolved to ask him about it the next time they met. Tanya asked whether Ash was close to Ban. Ash replied that he was and noted that Ban had been a great help to him. He then asked why Tanya referred to Ban as Banny. Tanya blushed and quickly clarified that it was not what Ash might be thinking. She explained that Ban used to visit her house when they were children. Ash and Micah exchanged a knowing glance, and Ash remarked that the situation sounded quite convenient. Micah agreed with him. Tanya insisted that there was nothing more to it and that there was no deeper meaning behind the nickname. Ash reassured her that there was no need to worry and said that he understood she and Ban were simply old acquaintances. Tanya agreed, but added that, rather than being close friends, Ban had mostly spoken with her parents when they were younger. She explained that her father frequently ventured into the forest, and since Ban came from a long line of hunters, their paths often crossed because of their work there. Ash realized that this connection might be useful and considered the possibility that Ban might know whether Tanya's father had made his own hive boxes. Tanya admitted that she was unsure about that. Ash believed that seeking Ban's help would benefit both their beekeeping efforts and Tanya as well. He suggested to Micah that it would be a good idea to gather everyone for a meeting with Ban. Micah agreed and said that she would inform her mother about the need to arrange a beekeeping meeting. However, Yukia was not yet prepared for such a meeting. The scene then shifted to the first meeting between Tanya and Ban at the chief's house. Yukia suggested that they discuss the matter over dinner. Ash noticed that Tanya was initially nervous during the meeting, but as time passed, she gradually gathered her resolve. Eventually, Tanya stood up, excused herself from Ban, and expressed her sincere gratitude for everything he had done for her. She explained that, although she disliked imposing on his kindness, she wished to become a beekeeper like her parents and asked for his help. Ban agreed without hesitation and mentioned that he remembered where Tanya's father used to make his hive boxes. He also said that he knew of several other promising locations within the forest. Ban added that he could help whenever he was not busy hunting or during any free time he had while on a hunt. If Tanya did not mind, he was willing to assist her. Tanya thanked him repeatedly, and Ban replied that there was no need for thanks, as he was simply glad to help. After that, Yukia quietly pulled Ash and Micah aside and told them that she would go prepare dinner. She expressed her relief and happiness that everything had worked out smoothly. Ash agreed and remarked that it seemed Ban had cared about Tanya for a long time and that it was reassuring to see things moving in a positive direction. With Ban's support, the problem of where to place the hive boxes was effectively resolved and the future of their beekeeping venture looked promising. After dinner, as Tanya was on her way home, she reflected on how happy she felt about being able to take up beekeeping with Ban and hoped that Jekyll would understand her enthusiasm. When she arrived home, she apologized for returning so late. Jekyll, who had been sitting at the dining table, stood up and told her that it was fine. He mentioned that he had already eaten some leftover wheat porridge for dinner. He then asked how the meeting had gone. Tanya explained that many things had been discussed and that Ban had agreed to help with their beekeeping work. Jekyll was surprised to hear this. Tanya added that Jekyll already knew how frequently Ban ventured into the forest, which was why Ban was familiar with the places where her father had once set up the hive boxes. Jekyll acknowledged this explanation, but appeared indifferent. He said that he was going to bed, and as he lay down, he found himself thinking about the past and considering that he might be able to help in a similar way. Micah recalled the words that said if she became someone capable of protecting Ash, it would be a truly positive thing, and she would be able to support his endeavors while standing firmly by his side. She thought that this was exactly what her mother had once told her. Micah knew that Ash was genuinely intelligent and always trying new things, such as beekeeping and making aloe salve. She also remembered that he had been brave enough to protect her from Jiggle and his friends. Micah told her mother that if she was meant to protect someone as remarkable as Ash, she needed to become better than she was at present and would have to work very hard. She then showed her mother a small wooden sword and explained that she planned to ask her father to teach her proper fencing so she could grow stronger. Yuki felt that Micah had misunderstood the true intent of her advice and hoped instead that Micah would help Ash navigate his relationships with others. Micah replied that she would do that later, but for now she needed to focus on learning how to protect him with her sword. She then remembered that she had planned to visit the church earlier that day and said she was leaving now, adding that she would begin her fencing lessons the following day. As Micah was about to leave, Yuki asked whether she truly intended to focus solely on fencing and questioned whether Micah had been listening at all. Yuki emphasized that learning proper social conduct for life in the capital would be far more useful. Despite this, Micah remained excited about the idea of protecting Ash. Meanwhile, Ash was reading a book with Folka. Folka pointed out that a particular character appeared repeatedly in several lines and suggested that they could make progress in deciphering the language if they managed to understand its meaning. He explained that simply forcing an interpretation would not work, as a meaning that seemed correct in one sentence could sound completely wrong in another, making it unclear what the character truly signified. Ash understood Folka's reasoning and commented that, although it was only a hunch, the character might carry multiple meanings or change its meaning when combined with specific characters. Folka agreed, noting that this could explain why some sentences appeared to be complete gibberish. Ash said that the explanation made sense, but added that, if this was true, deciphering the language would become even more difficult. Folk agreed with this assessment and remarked that while they had made some progress, it felt as though they had barely scratched the surface. He also mentioned that he had skimmed through the beekeeping book the other day, but had not found any sections that could help with deciphering the language. Ash then asked whether it would be alright to borrow the beekeeping book. Folky agreed, observing that Ash was planning to start beekeeping. Ash explained that he had already discussed it with Yuki and was eager to begin learning now, especially with spring approaching. Folk then asked what Ash was currently focusing on, pointing out the sudden shift and recalling that Ash had been talking about working with Aloe just the other day. Ash clarified that, if Folka was referring to the aloe salve, Yuki and the other women were handling its sales. He stressed that he needed to learn beekeeping as soon as possible, and added that he intended to take the book with him that very day. At that moment, Tanya and Micah arrived and knocked on the door. Ash remarked that they had arrived at just the right time. Tanya and Micah greeted them, and Tanya expressed her desire to begin her studies there as well, offering a respectful vow to Father Folka. Folka then confirmed that Tanya would be joining their study session so that they could all learn about beekeeping together. Ash, along with Micah and Tanya, went to the study area, where he opened the book and began reading. He soon came across information stating that honeybees conducted floral foraging within a radius of 2 to 3 miles, and inferred that the symbol written beside the numbers likely represented a unit of distance. Both Micah and Tanya were astonished by how quickly Ash grasped the information. Micah apologized and admitted that the material was too difficult for them to understand, asking Ash to explain it to them. Ash agreed and apologized for moving ahead of them. He explained that he would first read through the text and then gradually provide a detailed explanation of the content. Micah agreed to this approach. Tanya also apologized to Ash for making him teach them everything. Ash replied that it was no trouble at all, explaining that as long as he could begin learning beekeeping, he was happy to help. He remarked that although the book contained a great deal of information, there were certainly aspects that could not be learned from reading alone and would require hands-on experience. He added that if they encountered anything related to practical processes or tools, he would value Tanya's expertise. Tanya agreed to assist. The three of them then spent their time reading together and gaining a deeper understanding of beekeeping. Since Tanya had previously observed her parents working with bees, she proved to be a quick learner. Each time she understood the purpose of something new, she responded with visible excitement and delight. Ash believed that, with Ban's help, their beekeeping venture had a promising future, and their study sessions at the church had become more lively as a result. While reading, Ash remarked that the idea of using beehives to make candles was quite appealing, as it could provide people with inexpensive lighting for their daily lives. Micah expressed her excitement, commenting on how delicious the honey Tanya had collected the other day was. Tanya asked whether Micah was referring to the honey from the wolf beehive. She explained that if beekeeping turned out to be successful and they were able to harvest a large quantity, the honey could be used for cooking, making sweets, and many other purposes. Micah was thrilled by the idea and said that she hoped it would work out. Ash added that if they could produce goods to sell in town, it would significantly increase their earnings. Tanya agreed and said that she needed to become a skilled beekeeper and work hard for the sake of everyone in the village. She then pointed to a specific section in the book and asked Ash to explain it. Ash read the passage and explained that it was important to consider the blooming periods of plants that served as sources of nectar and pollen, as well as any changes in temperature. Based on this information, the placement of the hive boxes needed to be adjusted accordingly. He assumed this meant that it would be best to move the hive boxes with each season. Tanya agreed, recalling that her father used to do the same in the past. Ash suggested that they ask Ban about it the next time they met, and Tanya agreed with the idea. Micah then asked Tanya about her recent trips into the forest and whether the journey was as difficult as it appeared. Tanya replied that it truly was rough. She explained that she needed to become accustomed to moving through the forest in order to properly carry out her responsibilities as a beekeeper. For that reason, she had been training with Ban, with Ash accompanying them to provide support. Although Ash did not particularly mind, he admitted that the experience could be somewhat daunting. Tanya told both Ash and Micah that she had only gone into what was considered the safer, outer area of the forest, yet by the time they started heading back, she had been completely exhausted. Ash remarked that hiking through the forest was indeed demanding and encouraged Tanya to ask either him or Ban if she ever had any questions. Tanya then said that her concern was not related to forest travel, but to something she felt uncomfortable discussing with Ash. She explained that it involved Jekyll. Tanya acknowledged that Ash might not want to hear anything about him, but she also admitted that she had no one else to confide in. Ash reassured her that it was all right and encouraged her to speak openly about what was troubling her. Tanya thanked Ash and explained that recently Jekyll had stopped listening to her and seemed distant and distracted. She said that whenever she tried to talk to him about it, he would become angry and run away. Tanya added that she knew she was effectively filling in for her parents in Jekyll's life. While she felt she could somewhat take on her mother's role, she found it far more difficult to fulfill her father's role. Ash understood that Tanya was struggling with responsibilities and emotional burdens that she could not manage on her own. Tanya mentioned that Jekyll no longer seemed to spend time with his friends, which made her worry that he was isolating himself and suppressing his problems. Ash acknowledged that handling emotional matters like Jekyll's was something he also struggled with, but he still wanted to help Tanya. He understood that, without her parents, she had very few people she could easily rely on. Ash agreed to help and said that he would try to gently encourage Jekyll to talk about what was troubling him. Tanya apologized, urging Ash not to burden himself too much on her behalf. Micah then asked Ash if he was truly certain about getting involved. Ash replied that he intended to speak with Jekyll about the issue, though he admitted that Jekyll might dislike him. Because of that, he said he would need to think carefully about how to approach the conversation. At that moment, Jekyll was sitting alone in the grassland, lost in thought. Ash approached him and remarked that it was already dusk, asking whether Jekyll was not planning to head home. Upon hearing Ash's voice, Jekyll stood up, visibly angered, and asked if Ash had come to take revenge for their previous encounter. Ash clarified that he had no such intention and explained that he only wanted to talk for a while. Jekyll turned away and said that he had nothing to say to Ash. Ash asked him to wait, explaining that the matter was important because it concerned Tanya. Jekyll hesitated, prompting Ash to continue. He said that Tanya had seemed troubled lately, whether she was studying beekeeping with them or venturing into the forest alongside Ban. Ash asked whether Jekyll truly did not want his sister to be well and explained that, for her safety and peace of mind, he wanted to help ease her worries. He added that he hoped Jekyll might know something that could help him understand what was going on. Jekyll, overcome with rage, shouted at Ash to be quiet, saying that Ash was the last person he wanted to talk to. When Ash insisted that the matter concerned Tanya, Jekyll yelled that this was exactly the problem. He accused Ash of constantly trying to ingratiate himself with everyone around him, acting as though he wanted everyone's approval. Jekyll said he was disgusted by Ash's behavior and told him to stop pretending to be helpful and to mind his own business. He then charged at Ash, accusing him of having no understanding of how much Tanya had suffered. Jekyll shoved Ash to the ground and grabbed him by the collar, expressing his deep resentment toward what he saw as Ash's arrogance. He lashed out, saying that just because Ash had learned to read and write, made some medicine, and studied the beekeeping book, it did not make him special. Jekyll demanded to know why those small accomplishments were enough to earn Ash constant praise and questioned why Tanya relied on him so much. Overcome with emotion, Jekyll asked why Ash seemed to succeed at everything while he himself struggled to support his own sister. He admitted that he had been thinking constantly about how to help Tanya, especially since he had always been the one closest to her. As tears streamed down his face, Jekyll wondered why he was unable to help her, while Ash appeared to excel at everything he tried. Ash replied that he could not succeed at everything and explained that, for the things he could not do on his own, he had always relied on the help of others. He admitted that he often wondered whether he would ever be able to ease Tanya's worries by himself, which was why he had come to seek Jekyll's help. Ash added that he did not mind being hated, but he asked if Jekyll would lend his support for Tanya's sake, even if it was only this once. Jekyll slowly began rubbing his eyes as the two of them sat together. After a moment, he started to speak. He revealed that when their parents were still alive, he and Tanya had worked in the fields together just to make ends meet. They had never been able to afford more than the bare necessities, but they had managed to survive. No matter how difficult things became, they had always supported one another. Jekyll explained that it was only when he saw Tanya holding a book and crying that he finally realized how strongly she wanted to pursue beekeeping. At that moment, he understood that Tanya had quietly given up on her own desires so that she would not worry him, even as she continued to raise him through their daily hardships. He admitted that he had begun to feel as though he had been nothing but a burden to his sister. He said that he had believed they were helping each other, but now he realized how foolish he had been. He did not know anything about beekeeping and could not even read the book. The only thing he knew how to do was work in the fields, and that made him feel completely powerless when it came to supporting her dreams. Jekyll then confessed that he had recently noticed Tanya growing closer to Ban, which had led him to worry that she might end up marrying him. He admitted that this thought had been weighing heavily on his heart and had left him feeling deeply troubled. Ash asked whether that was truly the reason behind Jekyll's sadness. Jekyll clarified that it was not only about Tanya's growing closeness to Ban. He explained that what weighed on him most was his guilt. Tanya had never shown interest in romantic matters before, and he was convinced that this was his fault. He said that Tanya had always placed him above herself, and he believed that people must have approached her in the past, only for her to turn them down out of concern for him. Jekyll admitted that he actually liked Ban, even though Ban could be difficult to talk to at times. Ash remarked that Ban was indeed not the best conversationalist, and Jekyll agreed, adding that Ban was rather unsociable. Still, he said that if he were to entrust his sister to anyone, it would have to be someone he knew he could trust. Jekyll explained that he felt he should encourage Tanya to pursue a relationship with Ban, as he genuinely believed Ban was a good person. However, he also admitted that he felt as though he was always standing in the way whenever Tanya tried to seek her own happiness, and he hated himself for it. He said that he wanted her to forget about him, marry Ban, and live a fulfilling life as a beekeeper. At the same time, Jekyll confessed that if Tanya were to leave home, he would not know what to do or where to go. He felt trapped, unable to move forward, and admitted that he struggled to communicate these feelings to Tanya, even though he knew his silence only added to her worries. Ash began to understand how deeply troubled Jekyll was and how much this inner conflict was affecting Tanya as well. As he reflected on how he might help, Ash realized that Jekyll needed a clear direction in life, something that would allow him to find his own path. Having reached a decision, Ash told Jekyll that he had a solution and explained that he could offer him a proper job, one that would also help put Tanya's mind at ease. Jekyll asked about the nature of the job, clearly curious. Ash explained that Jekyll was fortunate, as a tradesman in the neighborhood was currently looking for an apprentice. Jekyll was shocked by the news and asked whether it was truly possible. Ash confirmed that he had heard it directly from the man himself, who was so short-staffed that he was willing to teach his trade openly and share his skills with a new apprentice. Overwhelmed with relief, Jekyll clasped his hands together and asked Ash to introduce him to the tradesman, promising that he would do whatever was required, no matter how small or difficult the task might be. Ash agreed and said that he would ask the man to visit Jekyll on a day when he was free. Jekyll accepted this gratefully, and then admitted that he had never stood a chance against Ash, apologizing for having behaved badly. Ash reassured him, saying that making the request would be simple and that he did not hold any resentment. Jekyll clarified that his apology was not limited to that moment, but extended to his behavior in the woods as well. He admitted that his frustration had stemmed from his inability to accomplish anything meaningful, while Ash seemed to succeed at everything and receive praise for it. Feeling lost and hopeless, Jekyll had begun to see Ash as a threat and had lashed out in response. Even so, he acknowledged that Ash had never exposed or humiliated him. Jekyll then knelt in front of Ash and offered a deep, sincere apology. Ash accepted it, telling him not to worry and explaining that he had never taken Jekyll's actions personally. He extended his hand and the two of them shook on it, marking their reconciliation. When Jekyll discovered that the tradesman was Ban, he was completely shocked. He immediately chased after Ash, exclaiming that Ash should have mentioned such an important detail from the very beginning. Jekyll went on to explain how startled he had been when Ban suddenly asked him to work under him. Ash pointed out that Jekyll had agreed to the apprenticeship before knowing who the tradesman was. He then suggested that Jekyll join them during their study sessions at the church, explaining that learning beekeeping properly would allow him to help Tanya even more. Still flustered, Jekyll complained about how he was supposed to learn all of that and admitted that he had nearly felt like hitting Ash out of frustration. Ash calmly told him not to worry, assuring him that with proper study and effort, there would be no need to resort to violence. Jekyll soon began his apprenticeship with Ban, learning the fundamentals of hunting wild game while also assisting with beekeeping. As time passed, he felt a sense of relief, knowing that Tanya's worries were finally being addressed. One day, as Ban, Ash, Tanya, and Jekyll ventured into the forest together, Jekyll reminded Tanya to watch her steps carefully. Tanya thanked him for his concern, and Ash commented on how dependable Jekyll had become. Jekyll replied confidently, saying that he would take care of everything. Ash reflected that ever since Jekyll had become Ban's apprentice, he had devoted himself seriously to working as a hunter. Along with his training, Jekyll had also been learning how to read and write at the church, as well as studying the basics of beekeeping. He had taken full responsibility for the rock-throwing incident and had formally apologized to both Ash and Tanya, even visiting Ash's home in person to make amends. At the same time, Tanya had made steady progress in her preparations for beekeeping, while the Aloe salve business had continued to thrive under Yukiya's management. Ash himself earned a regular income from the salve sales, which allowed him to cover the costs of experimental supplies such as pens, paper, and firewood. This financial stability significantly improved the efficiency of his research. His most recent achievement involved producing test samples of salves and candles using materials derived from beehives. In addition to this, he had begun working on another important research project. With winter approaching, a season that often brought death to the villagers, Ash found his thoughts returning to his past. He remembered growing up in Noscula, where food and medicine had been scarce, and where he had witnessed many people die from illness. Even something as minor as the common cold had proven fatal due to the absence of proper treatment. Because of this, some villagers would fall ill with high fevers, lose their appetite, and slowly waste away in pain until death. Such tragedies were common every winter, and whenever the season approached, Ash could not help but recall memories from his past, especially the days he had spent at home with his mother. He remembered a day when TL had come to call for him, and how his mother had greeted the boy warmly. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Ash had told his mother that he was going out to play with Tyla and would return later. She had smiled and wished both of them a good time. Ash recalled how he and Tila had played with their friends and enjoyed themselves greatly. However, after a while, Tila had grown tired, lay down, and complained that he felt unusually hot. Ash had thought it was probably because Tila had been running around too much. Soon after, their stomachs had begun to growl, and Tila had mentioned that he was very hungry and could really use some food. Ash remembered sitting there quietly, feeling sad, while Tyel had reassured him not to worry. Tyel had suggested that they pray to the monkey god for a good harvest, and had added that Ash's father was working hard in the forest, so there would surely be food. Ash had then pointed out that winter was approaching and that they should head home early. Tila had said that he hoped it would not get too cold, and explained that he would go home for now, but would come back later to play more. Ash had replied that he would be waiting. Tila had added that he would be gone for a while, and told Ash not to cry about missing him. Ash had assured him that he would not cry, after which Tila had taken his leave. Later, while Ash was at home, his mother came to speak with him about Tile. Ash asked whether Tile was getting better, recalling that he had seemed fine the other day and had promised they would play again once he recovered. He then asked if he could visit Tile the following day. Noticing that his mother did not look well, Ash asked what was wrong. She told him gently that Tile would no longer be able to play with him because he had passed away. Ash was stunned and immediately asked how that could have happened. His mother, Sheila, pulled him into an embrace and reminded him that Tile had caught a cold that never improved. Ash remained in disbelief and insisted that it could not be true. Sheila explained that Tile's condition had worsened over time. The cold had turned into a fever that would not subside, and eventually it had taken his life. She did not know how to properly comfort Ash, but she told him that he needed to be brave, as such losses might occur again in the future. Ash asked why it had to happen again in the future, and whether a cold truly could not be cured. Sheila replied that it was not easily treatable, at least not in their village. Later, Ash stood before Tile's grave, completely numb as rain poured down around him. He reflected on how many people he had known who had met similar fates, and wondered why life was so cruel and dangerous. He questioned why he had been unable to save anyone. At that moment, Sheila arrived, calling out to Ash and asking why he was standing outside in the cold. Worried, she asked if he was all right. Ash apologized for not returning home on time. Sheila, already in tears, hugged him tightly and reassured him that it was all right. She told him that he was a good boy and that such things happened in life, so he should not blame himself. Ash tried to push the painful memories aside and focused on his writing instead. He hoped that things could be different now. If his research succeeded, he believed they would be able to face winter more safely than before. At the time, Ash had been working on an antipyretic and fever-relieving medicine derived from the bark of a tree that appeared to be a type of willow. According to his knowledge, willow bark had been used since ancient times for its fever-reducing, pain-relieving, and anti-inflammatory properties. With winter fast approaching, he had very little time to fully verify its effects, so he felt pressured to hurry and bring it into practical use. Even if it reduced the number of cold-related deaths by only a small amount, he believed the effort would be worthwhile. One day, Ash made significant progress, and the completion of his fever reducer finally seemed close. However, he was aware that consuming broth made from willow bark carried a rare risk of severe reactions under certain conditions. Although the botany guide made no mention of such symptoms, and none of his experiments so far had shown any dangerous side effects, he realized that his lack of thorough preliminary research had made him careless. Despite having conducted extensive testing on marmots and even on himself without any problems, Ash decided that he should not distribute the medicine until he better understood what triggered those dangerous reactions. He also concluded that he needed to explore alternative ingredients to ensure a safer solution. Suddenly, Ash's mother rushed in with devastating news, telling him that Micah had collapsed from a severe fever. She explained that Micah was barely conscious, did not respond to anyone calling her name, and that her temperature was continuing to rise rapidly. If nothing was done soon, she feared that Micah might not survive. Ash's gaze immediately fell on the medicine he had prepared. He knew that it was capable of reducing fever, but he also understood that he had no time to determine what conditions might trigger the rare but dangerous symptoms. There was no opportunity to prepare an alternative treatment, and hesitation was not an option. He realized that he had to act immediately. Remembering the time he had spent with Micah, and unable to accept the thought of her suffering the same fate as Tiela, Ash felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. Taking the potentially life-saving medicine in his hands, he rushed out of the house, informing his mother that he was going to Micah's home. As he ran through the village, Ash resolved not to lose her. He desperately hoped that the medicine would work, and that this time, unlike before, he would be able to save someone. The scene shifted to Micah, who was struggling to breathe while waves of heat and cold alternated through her body, sensations she deeply despised. Her limbs felt unbearably heavy, and fear weighed down on her mind as she desperately hoped that someone would come to save her. Before long, she heard Ash's voice asking whether she was all right. Lying weakly in bed, Micah could hear him speaking with her parents, and she wondered why he had come. Through her haze, she overheard Ash discussing whether he should administer a certain medicine to her. She listened as Ash explained the situation to the village chief, saying that the medicine had extremely strong fever-reducing effects. However, he also admitted that there was a rare possibility of adverse reactions. From this, Micah understood that while the medicine could help lower her fever, it might also worsen her condition, which was why they were hesitating. Although the thought of taking such medicine frightened her, Micah realized that her current state was even more terrifying. If she refused the treatment, her condition might continue to deteriorate. The idea of enduring more suffering, especially losing the chance to spend time with Ash, or even losing her remaining days altogether, filled her with dread. Micah then heard Ash explain that the moment he had learned about her collapse, he had known he could not hesitate. He apologized sincerely for the uncertainty surrounding the medicine, but emphasized that his only wish was for her to survive. Determined, Micah stepped out of her room and declared that she would take the medicine. Yukiya immediately moved to stop her, insisting that moving around could worsen her condition and that she needed to rest. Micah reassured Yukiya by explaining that she had overheard their discussion and believed that if Ash had created the medicine, it would surely work. She urged everyone to hurry, adding that she wanted to continue studying and working alongside Ash. Despite Yukiya's lingering hesitation, Micah insisted that she had made up her mind and would take the medicine regardless of the outcome. Yukiya then turned to Klein, seeking his judgment. Seeing the determination in Micah's expression, Klein agreed that her decision should be respected. He gently placed a hand on her head and told her to take the medicine and recover quickly. Klein then asked Ash whether everything was prepared. Ash confirmed that it was and explained that he intended to carefully observe Micah's condition by administering the medicine in extremely small doses to ensure her safety. Micah called out to Ash, assuring him that she would recover soon. Ash, in turn, silently hoped and prayed that the medicine would work and that Micah would survive. Several days later, Ash visited the chief's house and apologized for arriving unannounced. Micah invited him inside. She was resting in bed, and Ash asked whether she felt well enough to sit up. Micah replied that she was comfortable doing so and explained that her fever had been extremely severe before, but thanks to Ash's medicine, she was now feeling fine. Relieved, Ash handed her a glass of water that Yukiya had prepared. Micah thanked him and remarked that the water tasted good and that she liked it. Ash was pleased to hear her response and explained that the water had been mixed with salt and honey, both of which were beneficial for her body. Micah thanked him once again, and Ash reassured her that it had been no trouble at all and that he was simply glad she enjoyed it. He then gently reminded her that she needed to rest. Micah agreed and, as she lay back down, asked whether Ash was planning to leave. Ash thought about it briefly before offering to stay and talk with her for a while, as long as she did not mind. He mentioned that he had recently made significant progress with his beehive experiments. Hearing this, Micah became excited and asked what kind of progress he had achieved. Ash explained that, to begin with, he had successfully produced candles and salves. However, he added that he still needed to conduct more thorough research to understand the effects of combining aloe salve with the other materials he was experimenting with. Micah commented that Ash was truly impressive. In response, Ash explained that much of his progress was thanks to the beekeeping book, which provided detailed guidance on the manufacturing process. He also mentioned that he had made further advances with his fever-reducing medicine and had discovered a medicinal herb that appeared to be safer than the willow bark medicine he had administered to her earlier. He explained that he was currently in the process of testing this new herb. Micah expressed her surprise, saying that she had never known such a herb existed, and then asked what his next steps would be. Ash apologized for what had happened before, explaining that due to insufficient research, he had allowed her to take a medicine that carried unnecessary risks. He admitted that if he had considered the risk factors earlier, he could have provided her with a much safer treatment. Micah reassured Ash that there was no need for him to apologize. She told him that she would not be feeling better now if he had not rushed to bring her the medicine, and for that, she was truly grateful. She then asked about the progress of his new fever reducer tests. Ash replied that everything was proceeding smoothly and that he hoped to have the medicine fully prepared before winter arrived. He added that he had already discussed the matter with Yukiya, who planned to stockpile fever reducers and food at her home so they could be distributed to anyone who fell ill. Micah asked how the distribution would work. Ash explained that the arrangement was meant to reduce the burden on the village. Preparing enough food and medicine for every household was both difficult and expensive, and by having Yukiya store the supplies, villagers would be able to access what they needed more easily, without having to wait for the occasional traveling peddler. Micah remarked that if people could obtain medicine and other necessities directly from Yukiya, those who caught colds would have far less to worry about. Ash agreed, stating that this was exactly the goal of the plan. He explained that his focus now needed to be on producing enough fever reducer so that everyone in the village could receive a fair share. Finally, Ash said that he should not stay any longer and advised Micah to avoid overexerting herself and to get some proper rest. Micah agreed and thanked Ash for his concern. Ash then mentioned the beehive Salve and asked whether she would be willing to help him test it sometime in the future. Micah readily agreed, and Ash expressed his gratitude, telling her that she should focus on fully recovering first. Micah promised that she would do her best to overcome her cold as quickly as possible. Ash then left the house alongside Yukiya, apologizing for having stayed so long. Yukiya waved off his apology and instead thanked him sincerely for helping Micah. Ash reassured her that he had conducted extensive testing on the fever reducer and promised to deliver it to her as soon as it was ready. Yukiya expressed her appreciation for his efforts and noted that, thanks to Ban and Jekyll's work, as well as the income generated from the Aloe salve, the village was well stocked with food and even had funds to spare. She thanked Ash on behalf of the village chief's household, acknowledging that his contributions had ensured they would be well prepared for the coming winter. Ash replied that the gratitude should instead be directed toward Yukiya and the villagers who had supported him throughout his work. Yukiya remarked that they had always braced themselves for losses during winter, but she had a strong feeling that this year would be different. Ash agreed with her sentiment and resolved to work even harder to ensure that everyone endured the winter safely. He hoped that when spring finally arrived, they would be able to welcome it together, with every villager alive and well. As Ash left, he reflected on Yukiya's optimism. Despite her confidence, he could not ignore the fact that he had administered potentially dangerous medicine to Micah, nor the reality that he had been unable to find any reference to the severe symptoms he feared. He realized that there were clear limits to what he could accomplish within the village, not only in medicine, but in his overall pursuit of knowledge. The comfortable and secure life he longed for still felt distant. Ash understood that, one day, he would need to leave the village, possibly traveling to the capital, where he could gain access to more books, deeper knowledge, and better resources. For the time being, however, he resolved to continue working with what he had and to prepare carefully for the future. When he returned home, Ash greeted his mother and then encountered his father, David, who was drunk and shouting. David scolded Ash harshly, accusing him of spending too much time buried in books and insisting that he should be working in the fields instead. David often remarked that for those born into farming families, a man's worth was defined by the hard work he put into the fields. He believed that dedication, a warm smile, and a strong work ethic earned respect from others and ensured that a man could provide for his family. However, Ash was different. Instead of focusing on farm work, he hurried through his duties and eagerly immersed himself in his books. Despite David's repeated warnings that neglecting the fields would harm their harvest, Ash only grew more absorbed in his studies. Before David fully realized it, Ash had begun involving the village chief's family in his ideas and had taken up activities such as brewing beer and making medicine, anything that kept him away from farm labor. Although David acknowledged Ash's remarkable achievements and understood how demanding studying could be, he remained conflicted. Sheila, on the other hand, always smiled and proudly stated that Ash was their pride and joy. David shared her pride, yet he still felt that Ash should devote more time to working in the fields. Later, while drinking beer with his friends, David expressed his belief that farm work was far more important than studying for the son of a farmer. One friend agreed, pointing out that although Ash did help in the fields, his true focus clearly lay in academics. Another friend came to Ash's defense, arguing that he was not avoiding work and that David was worrying too much. The first friend then suggested that David's concern might simply stem from Ash being exceptionally intelligent and not fitting neatly into the traditional role expected of him. The third man then teasingly remarked that it was difficult to believe Ash was truly David's son. Offended by the comment, David lashed out angrily at him. The man immediately apologized, explaining that he had only been joking, and added that Sheila had believed in David even when no one else had. Another friend attempted to ease the tension by urging David to drink more. David drained his cup in a single gulp and loudly demanded silence. Later, when he returned home, he collapsed in place, with his head hanging low. Sheila asked him how much he had drunk, but David was too intoxicated to respond properly and struggled to form a clear answer. Sheila told him to hurry and get ready, reminding him that she still had several tasks to finish. David agreed, and as he raised his head, he noticed that Ash had not yet returned home. At that moment, David resolved that once Ash came back, he would assert his authority as a father and give him a stern reprimand he would not soon forget. When Ash finally arrived, David immediately ordered him to focus on working in the fields and stop wasting time reading books. Ash responded with a gloomy expression, which only irritated David further, prompting him to tell Ash to sit down. As Ash obeyed, David declared that boys were meant to work in the fields. Ash did not deny this and acknowledged that farming was indeed a man's responsibility. However, he explained that the knowledge he gained from books, particularly about work management and growing conditions, had actually made fieldwork easier. David shouted that Ash was being foolish, insisting that the more time and effort one invested in the fields, the better the results would be. In response, Ash calmly stated that he had been recording the field's output and believed that achieving a better harvest required careful observation of the farmland itself. David lowered his head once more, wondering why Ash had to be so intelligent. In that moment, he admitted to himself that he had not been a good husband or a good father, and that he had failed to properly fulfill his responsibilities as a parent. Despite these shortcomings, he recognized that Ash had grown into a fine young man, far wiser than David himself, and that he was always thoughtful and caring toward Sheila. David felt conflicted as he tried to lecture Ash, knowing how flawed he himself was. Eventually, he stood up and asked Ash whether he truly was his son. Ash answered without hesitation that he was, explaining that no matter how one looked at it, he was undeniably David's son. He added that if this were not the case, he would not be able to understand David's drunken, slurred words so clearly. David asked if Ash was being serious. Ash confirmed it, saying that he had grown up watching David from a distance. He admitted that proving one's strength through excessive drinking was not admirable, but David had nonetheless demonstrated his resolve in his own way. David accepted this, realizing that Ash had seen his father's weaknesses firsthand, and yet had still grown into an admirable son. He acknowledged that Ash's character made him want to become a better father himself. At that point, Sheila approached Ash and thanked him for listening patiently to his father. David, she explained, had his own way of showing how deeply he cared for Ash. Whenever others praised Ash, David felt overwhelming pride and happiness. Sheila then asked Ash not to mention that she had spoken to him about these matters. Ash agreed and promised to keep it to himself. As time passed, spring arrived, bringing with it the annual Spring Tiding Festival. The event was meant to lift the spirits of the entire village before everyone returned to working in the fields. That year, the festival was particularly lively, as the villagers had endured the winter without losing a single life. Ash felt genuinely pleased by this accomplishment. David approached Ash and remarked on how festive the atmosphere felt, noting that many villagers were already heavily drunk. Ash asked whether David was drinking less this year. David confirmed that he was, explaining that he needed to start acting more responsibly as a father. Ash responded by saying that he was proud to be the son of such a respectable man. Hearing this, David straightened slightly, filled with pride. Ash then added that reducing his alcohol intake would likely improve David's health. He admitted that he was not yet very strong himself, which made him grateful to have someone as reliable as his father to depend on. David laughed at that and replied that Ash was not quite ready to surpass him yet, but assured him that he could always rely on David whenever he needed help. After that, Ash mentioned that he had a favor he wanted to ask. When David asked about the favor, Ash explained that Tanya had taken up beer brewing, which meant the fields at her house were now unused. He said they had discussed how the work required to manage those fields should be divided and wondered if he and David could handle them together. Ash also mentioned that he had an experiment he wanted to carry out. David replied that it was a simple matter and that managing the extra fields would not be a problem at all. Pleased by this, Ash offered to help with the additional workload. However, David shook his head and reassured him that there was no need to overthink it. He told Ash that the fields at Tanya's place were no trouble and that he would take care of them himself. Ash felt deeply relieved and expressed his gratitude, knowing he could always rely on his father. A few days later, after David had taken over the work at those fields, Ash began focusing on his new experiment. At that time, Ash was in the garden with Micah. She asked him whether he thought she was doing well. Ash agreed and remarked that she was making good progress with the book, pointing out the next section she should focus on. After confirming her understanding, he thanked her for helping with the experiment. Micah replied that it was the least she could do, especially since Ash had helped her when she was ill. She then asked whether the experiment was truly that important. Ash explained that if everything went according to plan, the harvest would improve and that the flowers were meant to benefit the fields. He added that he had initially abandoned the idea because there was not enough space in their own fields, but his father's support had given him the opportunity to try it after all. He also mentioned that he had noticed Micah's hands glowing and commented that the beehive setup appeared to be working well. Micah agreed and remarked that this was likely the reason her skin had become smooth and healthy. Ash suggested that since there seemed to be no negative effects, they could consider selling the product once they had a stable supply. Micah expressed hope that Tanya's beer brewing would also succeed, noting how much effort Tanya had been putting into it. Ash replied that Tanya's journey had only just begun. He observed that despite all her preparation, she seemed to be encountering many difficulties when it came to putting her plans into practice. Micah agreed, commenting that even with extensive study, applying knowledge in real situations was still difficult. Ash added that these were experiences they all needed to go through in order to truly understand, and mentioned that he was thinking of checking on Tanya later. Micah asked if she could come along and offered to help in any way she could. Ash asked whether she was certain, admitting that he would feel guilty if he kept relying on her for assistance. Micah insisted that Ash had helped her far more than she had helped him. She added that her mother had mentioned how much Ash had contributed to the village through his work with Aloe, Salve, Beekeeping, and the fever reducer, and said that he had truly made a positive impact. Ash replied that she was giving him too much credit. He explained that he could not have achieved any of it on his own, and that he had received help from many people along the way. He acknowledged that while he understood his actions had benefited the village, his true aim was to fulfill his own personal dreams, which meant his motives were not entirely selfless. He emphasized that it was important to thank everyone who had supported him, as forgetting their help could lead to arrogance and, eventually, failure. He then expressed his gratitude to Micah for her constant support. Micah immediately dismissed the need for thanks, telling him that he did not owe her anything. She reassured him that she would do her best to keep up with him. In response, Ash said that he would need to work even harder to be worthy of her effort, and added that he wanted to continue improving things for everyone. Suddenly, the sound of the emergency bell rang through the village, and Ash noticed villagers running past them in panic. One man asked another whether anyone had been attacked. The second man replied that he did not know, and added that they were powerless to deal with the situation on their own. Ash then asked what was happening. The man urgently told them to run, explaining that the village was no longer safe because a bear had entered the area. Ash and Micah were both shocked by the news. Ash knew that bears were omnivores, capable of eating both plants and animals, but he had heard stories claiming that once a bear developed a taste for human flesh, it would prefer nothing else. If such a creature were to attack one of the villagers, the consequences would be disastrous. Unfortunately, the people capable of dealing with such a threat were not present. Village Chief Klein, an experienced swordsman, was currently in the capital, while Ban and Jackal, both of whom had recent hunting experience, had gone into the forest and would not return for several days. As a result, Ash realized that he was the only person in the village with enough hunting knowledge to handle a bear. He told Micah to evacuate to the church along with the others and explained that he had something he needed to take care of first, after which he would join them. Micah, clearly frightened, objected and said it was dangerous for him to go alone, insisting on accompanying him instead. Ash refused, urging her to go to the church and inform everyone that he would stop by his house before joining them. He explained that he did not want anyone to think he had gone missing. Micah protested, reminding him that the rule was for everyone to gather at the church as soon as the emergency bell rang, and insisted that he should come as well. Ash calmly reassured her that he would be fine and promised that he would arrive at the church shortly. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he asked her to pass his message along to the others and entrusted her with the responsibility. Overcome with emotion, Micah asked him to promise that he would return safely. Ash gave her his word, and with that, he hurried back toward his house. When Ash arrived home, he found that his parents had already evacuated to the church. Realizing that there was no time to waste, he knew he had to act quickly. He gathered 2 spears, a bow, several arrows, and a few small hunting tools from his quiver. His intention was to drive the bear away if it came too close to the church. With his equipment ready, Ash headed back toward the village. As he approached, a loud roar echoed through the area, and he soon spotted the bear standing before him. He realized that it was the end of the hibernation season, and that the animal was most likely searching for food. When their eyes met, Ash understood that the bear's purpose was simple. It was looking for something to eat. He judged that allowing the bear to get any closer to the church would be too dangerous. After a brief moment of thought, he decided that confronting it directly was the best option. Maintaining a calm and welcoming tone, he acknowledged the bear's presence in the village. He attempted to reason with it, thinking that if the bear was hungry, offering food might prevent unnecessary conflict. Ash observed that the bear remained cautious, carefully scanning its surroundings as if searching for other threats. He continued speaking, suggesting that the bear could satisfy its hunger without harming anyone, and then return to the forest. He believed that this solution would benefit both sides. However, the bear responded with a loud roar, causing Ash to question whether he could truly manage the situation. Even so, he understood that he had no choice but to face it. The bear showed no sign of leaving peacefully, and Ash resolved that he would not stand by and allow it to destroy the village. He felt a deep bond with the place, seeing it as an essential part of his dreams and future ambitions. He believed that if he were ever to tell his story, this village would mark only the beginning of something far greater. Ash addressed the bear, stating that if it intended to destroy the village, he would have no choice but to stand against it. He openly declared himself the bear's enemy. When the bear began to chase him, Ash decided to abandon the spears to maintain distance, choosing instead to rely on his bow and arrows to protect the village. He fired an arrow at the bear, but it barely penetrated its thick hide. The bear responded by charging at him violently, forcing Ash to retreat. As the creature lunged again, Ash noticed a faint glimmer on its claws and immediately recognized it as the paralytic poison Ban had given him for hunting. He hoped the poison would slow the bear down. Acting quickly, Ash coated his spear with the poison and braced himself for the next attack. The bear charged once more, but Ash managed to dodge and thrust the spear into its side. The counterattack came immediately. The bear struck back, snapping the spear in half and slashing Ash's hand with its claws before retreating a short distance. Ash grimaced in pain, realizing that the poison was beginning to take effect. He understood that he needed to stop the bleeding as soon as possible. As the bear continued to advance, Ash estimated that he had only a few minutes before the poison's effect faded. He hoped he could endure until then. Calling out to the bear, Ash suggested that since both of them were injured and neither could properly use their right arms, it might be reasonable to consider the fight a draw. The bear responded with a roar and charged again, making it clear that it had no intention of backing down. Seeing no other option, Ash grabbed a nearby stick and swung it at the bear's head. He then retrieved what remained of his spear and prepared himself for another round of combat. Ash began to doubt that he could last much longer. Still, he forced himself to stand his ground and prepared for the bear's next charge. Fear gripped him deeply, sending a bone-chilling terror through his body, and he knew the odds were heavily stacked against him. Even so, he reasoned that the bear must be afraid as well. It was charging straight toward the tip of a deadly spear, turning the confrontation into a perilous contest where either side could fall. Ash acknowledged the bear's courage. As a creature of the wild, it had likely faced many dangers before, yet he believed it had never truly faced death itself. His thoughts drifted to the sensation of dying, recalled vividly even through the hazy memories of his previous life. He remembered the faltering beats of his heart, his vision slowly fading, and the sound of the wind standing alone, free of the noise of a living body, as consciousness slipped away. Rather than letting that memory overwhelm him, Ash used it to steady himself. He turned his fear of death into resolve, forcing it to counter the terror threatening to paralyze him. When the bear charged once more, it suddenly hesitated. Ash immediately realized that fear had finally taken hold of the creature. Seizing that moment, he thrust the spear forward again. The bear's jaws came dangerously close, but its strength failed at the last instant. The massive body collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Completely exhausted, Ash allowed himself to rest and released a long breath, quietly acknowledging his hard-won victory. However, when he assessed his condition, he realized that his injuries were severe and that blood was still flowing freely. He understood that he had to stop the bleeding as soon as possible. Despite the pain coursing through his body, Ash refused to give up. There were still many things he wanted to accomplish, dreams he had yet to fulfill. Holding on to that determination, he swore to himself that he would survive. As the villagers finished evacuating and closed the church doors behind them, Micah's worry for Ash grew stronger. David approached her and asked whether Ash was with her. Micah replied that Ash had told her he would stop by his home first and then return to the church. Moments later, a sudden noise startled everyone, and they began to feel that it was unsafe to remain there. Alarmed, Micah rushed toward the door and asked for it to be opened. One of the men stopped her and pointed out that Ash had not returned yet. When Micah tried to step outside, the man warned her that it was dangerous and insisted that she stay inside while he went to check instead. Ignoring his warning, Micah pushed forward, despite the others asking her to wait. As she moved ahead, she came upon the body of a dead bear, and nearby she saw Ash lying on the ground. The sight of him in such a condition filled her with terror. The others quickly followed after her. David asked Sheila whether she had seen Ash, and without waiting for an answer, he rushed to Ash's side, urging him to hold on. Sheila stared at the scene in disbelief, wondering how something like this could have happened. She then turned to Yukiya and asked what they should do. Yukiya responded that they needed to administer first aid immediately to stop the bleeding. Although Ash had managed to apply a tourniquet on his own, it was clear that the bleeding had not fully stopped. As they worked desperately to help him, they all wished that Klein were there to guide them. Micah was left in shock, unable to understand how Ash had ended up in such a critical condition. The others also began to speculate whether the bear was truly dead and whether Ash had been the one to defeat it. Despite their questions, everyone shared the same concern. Ash was bleeding heavily, and his condition was worsening by the moment. Micah feared that if the bleeding continued at that rate, Ash would not survive. Overcome with panic, she struggled to think of what she could do to help. The thought of losing him, of no longer being able to talk with him or study beside him, felt unbearable. In that moment of despair, she remembered the instructions Ash had once given her about treating injuries and realized that she already knew what needed to be done. Recalling how Ash had cared for her when she had suffered from a fever, Micah felt that it was now her turn to help him. Gathering her resolve, she told everyone that they needed to administer first aid immediately. She instructed David and Sheila to carry Ash to her house and asked the nearby villagers to bring hot water as quickly as possible. Tanya stepped forward and offered her assistance, explaining that she had learned basic first aid from Ban. She then headed toward the forest to gather the necessary supplies. At the same time, Folka brought the book Ash had used to study medical treatment, hoping it would contain the proper methods for treating his wounds. Yukiya then asked Micah to consider whether there might be anyone else who could help. She offered her own assistance and assured Micah that she would explain the situation to those still at the church before joining them as soon as she could. Feeling a surge of determination, Micah urged everyone to hurry and head to her house without delay. After arriving at her home, Micah and the others immediately began administering first aid to Ash. Once the bandaging was complete, Tanya commented that the treatment should help stabilize his condition. Folka observed that Ash's fever appeared to be subsiding and, based on his assessment, believed that Ash was slowly improving. Sheila expressed her gratitude to both Tanya and Folka for their help. Folka replied that he would search through additional books for more information and return if he found anything useful. Tanya said that she would also head back home but instructed Micah to call for her if they needed any further assistance. Sheila agreed and thanked them once again before Folka and Tanya took their leave. Feeling both relieved and drained, Micah sat down beside Sheila. She offered her fresh towels and spare bandages in case they were needed. Sheila thanked her for the kindness. Micah then encouraged Sheila to rest and not push herself too hard, especially if Micah herself appeared exhausted. She reassured Sheila that she was fine and explained that everything she was doing was for Ash's sake. Afterward, Sheila began reminiscing about the day Ash had been born. She recalled a snowy winter night when David had first introduced Ash to her. She fondly remembered playing with him, describing him as a small bundle of endless energy. She remarked that Ash could not have chosen a more fitting night to enter the world. David agreed, adding that the sun had set so quickly that it had been difficult to give Ash his first bath in the darkness. He mentioned that the village chief had fortunately provided them with candles at the time. Sheila commented that they should remember to thank the chief again when they had the opportunity. David then asked whether Ash had fallen asleep. After observing him for a moment, he remarked that they needed to choose a name for him, or at least begin thinking about one if it was not already too early. Sheila agreed, saying that they should decide now, as it was the least they could do after he had safely come into the world. David began to consider what kind of name would be suitable, hoping for one that symbolized healthy growth and brought good fortune. Sheila suggested that since Ash had been born on such a cold night, his name should represent warmth and light, something that implied he would never lack either. David agreed with her reasoning, noting that she had a thoughtful way of choosing names and that he trusted her sense in such matters. Sheila then proposed selecting a name related to the sun or the stars. David agreed, adding that between the two, the sun felt like the better choice. Sheila continued by mentioning ideas connected to summer and fire, and even everyday sources of warmth such as stoves or candles. As they discussed these possibilities, they gradually realized that dawn had already broken. David then decided to step outside to prepare breakfast. He mentioned that the chef had given him some soup and asked Sheila to make sure Ash ate it once he woke up. With that, he went to tend to the remaining coals from the previous day. Left alone with her thoughts, Sheila reflected further on Ash's name and eventually suggested Ash as a possibility. When David heard the name, he questioned whether it might be too plain and asked if she was certain about it. Sheila acknowledged that it did sound simple, but explained that she wanted a name that symbolized protection and resilience. Sheila explained that because Ash had been born in such a harsh environment, he might not receive the same blessings as those born in gentler seasons like spring or autumn. Growing up in a remote place with many hardships ahead, she felt that a name like Ash symbolized endurance, the ability to survive long, bitter nights and keep the fire alive until the next day. She hoped the name would represent the strength to protect those flames until the very end. David responded by remarking that a banked fire could not exist without ashes. When Sheila asked him to explain what he meant, David simply agreed that Ash was indeed a fitting name. Sheila then thanked Micah for listening and shared that she still remembered that moment clearly. Micah replied by recounting a story she had once heard from Folka about Ash. She remembered a time when Ash had gone missing in the forest with no sign of returning, which had left her deeply worried. During that time, Foka had shared an old legend with her. According to the legend, there was once an immortal bird god that could never truly die. Whenever the bird was wounded or grew old, it would gather cinnamon branches, ignite a magical fire, and burn itself. After the flames faded, the bird would rise again from the ashes, reborn stronger and healthier than before. Micah explained that this legend perfectly symbolized the strength and resilience associated with the name Ash. She reassured Sheila that just as the bird in the story emerged from the ashes renewed, she believed Ash would also be fine. She expressed her confidence that if they continued to care for his wounds properly, Ash would recover and survive without issue. Micah recalled how Ash had taught her various first aid treatments and felt grateful for the assistance she had received from Tanya and Folka. She had carefully studied the medical books, reviewed the instructions repeatedly with everyone, and tended to Ash's wounds exactly as she had been taught. Despite all her efforts, however, Ash had remained unconscious for several days. Overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion, Micah eventually broke down in tears. She confessed that she was afraid she might have treated him incorrectly and did not know what would happen next. She felt that she had failed him and was consumed by guilt, believing that if she had acted differently, perhaps by escaping with Ash sooner, he might never have been injured. Feeling responsible for his condition, she apologized to Sheila through her sobs. Sheila pulled Micah into a tight embrace and reassured her that none of it was her fault. She acknowledged Micah's dedication and the immense effort she had put into caring for Ash, expressing her confidence that he would eventually wake up. Micah then asked how long Ash would remain in that state, lamenting that there were still so many things she wanted to talk about and share with him. She admitted that she was terrified of losing him and did not want him to die. At that moment, Ash finally stirred and murmured an apology. Both Sheila and Micah were stunned and then overwhelmed with joy upon realizing that he had regained consciousness. Sheila immediately hurried off to call David, while Micah stayed by Ash's side. She told him how frightened she had been when he would not wake up and confessed that she had feared she might never be able to speak with him again. Now that he was awake, Micah felt an intense wave of relief and gratitude. Tears filled her eyes once more as she expressed how glad she was that he had returned to them. Ash, in turn, thanked her for everything she had done to help him. When Ash woke up, he was given strict instructions not to leave the room under any circumstances. With the farming season at its busiest and his concerns about the progress of his test crops and beekeeping, the order troubled him deeply. However, everyone insisted in unison that he obey and remain where he was. Ash informed Folka about the situation, and Folka remarked that if they stopped watching Ash, he would likely return to his usual strange behavior. Ash protested that they were treating him like a child, which only made Folka laugh. Folka then showed him the book they had previously been discussing, suggesting that Ash would otherwise be unbearably bored. Ash accepted the book and commented that he had known Folka would understand his frustration. Folka agreed and added that Ash would need to repay the loan once he had fully recovered, advising him to visit later to help with some decoding work. Ash replied that he already had plenty of tasks to handle, but Folka firmly reminded him that a loan was still a loan. While resting and immersing himself in the book, Ash ended up recuperating at the village chief's house for quite some time. Whenever he tried to apologize for the inconvenience and express his gratitude, he found himself being thanked instead. Yuri remarked on how remarkable it was that such a large bear had caused so little damage and thanked Ash for protecting the village. Ash felt that Yuri's attentiveness and care made him feel almost indebted to her, though he did not dislike the feeling. As he continued reading, he realized that he had always been fond of the story he was revisiting, and he found the section on herbal tea recipes particularly fascinating. Ash realized that if he wanted to further improve life in the village, he would need to study nearly every practical guide available at the church. Despite this, he came to the conclusion that making additional progress would be difficult. He considered advancing farming methods, particularly the creation of fertilizer, but the overwhelming flood of technical terminology made the subject hard to grasp. When he attempted to deepen his understanding of chemistry, he discovered that no books offered proper explanations. He had Folka contact the temple church in the regional capital to inquire about chemistry-related texts, but they struggled to find anything useful. Civilization had not yet reached a stage where concepts such as germs and viruses were clearly understood. They existed only as vague ideas recorded in ancient writings. It was evident that technological progress had been uneven and incomplete. To make matters worse, Ash lacked the necessary equipment. The wood stove produced flames that were too weak to properly regulate temperature. He had no laboratory tools capable of withstanding chemical reactions, nor any reliable way to measure heat accurately. As a result, he was severely ill-equipped to conduct chemical experiments, and producing even a single batch of fertilizer proved far from simple. Nevertheless, increasing food production was essential. Recently, however, Ash had reached a dead end. He realized that he would need to start thinking seriously about how to acquire the materials and tools the village lacked. Yukiya arrived shortly afterward and asked about Ash's condition. Ash greeted her and thanked her for taking care of him, saying that he was feeling well enough to fully enjoy his reading. Yukiya expressed her relief and then asked if she could speak with him privately for a moment. Ash agreed. Yukiya then informed him that she was planning to send Micah to her parents' home in the capital during the winter so that she could continue her studies. Ash reflected on the importance of proper education. Yukiya explained that Micah was already proficient in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and would manage well even without studying in the capital. However, she emphasized that learning in the city offered more than academic knowledge alone. Ash agreed, noting that forming connections and gaining an understanding of society beyond the village were equally important. Yukiya shared his view and added that Micah had grown far more capable thanks to everything Ash had taught her. Ash replied that Micah's progress was the result of her own effort and determination, and that he had simply supported her eagerness to learn. Yukiya acknowledged Ash's modesty, but as Micah's mother and a member of the village chief's family, she expressed her sincere gratitude and hoped that he would accept it. Ash responded that he was honored to receive such appreciation and accepted her thanks without hesitation. He reflected that it felt good to be recognized and praised by someone he respected. Although he was pursuing his own ambitions, it reassured him to know that his efforts were valued by others. Yukiya then asked whether she and the others might be allowed to remain grateful to him indefinitely. Ash replied that he understood her meaning and admitted that, after hearing her speak so earnestly, he could no longer act freely without considering the burden his actions might place on others. Yukiya observed that this shift in his thinking meant she had won the exchange, to which Ash conceded that he had indeed been bested. Ash reflected that he had never intended to harm others through reckless behavior, yet there were times when his emotions overtook him, leading him to make decisions without fully considering their consequences. He reasoned that this was likely why Yukiya had chosen to appeal to his emotions, to rein in his impulsiveness as a precaution. Although he felt somewhat restrained by this realization, he also acknowledged that he might have been more irresponsible than he had previously believed. Yukiya reassured him that she had managed to soften his outlook for the time being, and then gently returned to her original topic. She mentioned that she had a small offer to make. Curious, Ash asked what it was. Yukiya then asked whether he would like to accompany Micah to the capital. At this, Ash's expression immediately brightened, and he eagerly accepted. He asked when they would be leaving, clearly excited by the idea. He had long heard that the capital's temple was far larger than the modest church in their village, and believed it would contain a vast collection of books. In addition, the capital served as a hub for trade from surrounding villages and cities, offering access to a wide range of materials, knowledge, and technology. Ash was eager at the thought of finally being able to pursue research that had so far remained beyond his reach. Yukiya remarked that she was certain Ash was already beginning to slip back into his old habits. Ash denied it, though he admitted that he was being a little too open about his excitement. Yukiya replied that she had anticipated this reaction and had prepared several ways to persuade him, adding that although the royal capital was not vastly superior in every regard, its environment and society were still very different from those of their village. Ash expressed his growing enthusiasm, wondering why he was still sitting around and feeling an urge to rush off and begin preparing immediately. Yukiya gently advised him to calm down. Ash apologized, acknowledging that he had allowed his excitement to get the better of him, and then asked when they would be departing. Yukiya explained that Micah would be leaving during the winter and that Ash could accompany her if he wished. However, she added that before doing so, Ash would need to speak with his parents, delegate his responsibilities to others, and complete various other preparations. She also noted that she did not expect them to return to the village anytime soon. Ash realized that leaving would mean stepping away from all the work he had been involved in, including his beekeeping efforts, and placing his personal research on hold. He would also be unable to see the villagers for a long time. When Yukiya asked whether he was having second thoughts, Ash reflected that remaining in the village might limit his chances for new experiences, while studying in the capital would undoubtedly mark a major turning point in his life. He believed it would be an important step toward a more prosperous future and resolved to continue moving forward. With that conviction, he asked for permission to go as well. Ash acknowledged that he would need to make the preparations Yukia had suggested. He felt eager to inform the villagers that he would not be present during the winter and to leave behind written instructions for handing over his responsibilities. He believed it was important that as many people as possible be able to read and understand those instructions. He also intended to ask whether anyone wished to continue his studies in his absence. In addition, he needed to accelerate his work on the test fields and compile all the research results he had gathered so far. The thought of completing these tasks excited him, as it meant that a busy period lay ahead. Yukia remarked that it was almost concerning how much he seemed to enjoy juggling so many responsibilities, and advised him to allow his wounds to heal first. Ash agreed and said that he would begin with tasks he could manage while seated. Once he had recovered, Ash went to see Folka to explain his decision to travel to the capital. He told him that studying there had always been his ambition, and that he would be doing so at the village chief's recommendation, with the cost of his stay even being covered. Folka expressed surprise at Ash's plan to study in the capital, and noted that this meant he would be away for a long time. Ash confirmed that he expected to remain there for roughly 2 years. During that time, he would have opportunities to visit the village occasionally, though the details had not yet been finalized. He expressed excitement at the prospect of taking his time to study the city's books and broaden his range of skills. He added that his injuries were nearly healed and that he was currently organizing his departure. Folka smiled and observed that Ash tended to move quickly from one pursuit to another, which was precisely why those who cared about him felt the need to keep a close watch on him. Ash replied that, since he was Folka's #1 disciple, Folka might as well worry about him a little more. Folka chuckled and brushed the comment aside, saying it was nonsense, and that Ash was not the type to give up or quit so easily. Ash then remarked that he had come close to death during his illness. Folka agreed and recalled that when he had seen Ash burning with that terrible fever, it had only reinforced his belief in Ash's resilience. Folka asked what Ash had been thinking while struggling through the fever. Ash explained that he had kept telling himself that he would not die, and that he was determined to live, no matter what. Folk laughed and said that Ash had been muttering about not dying even in his sleep. According to him, it was no surprise that the Grim Reaper, having come for Ash, had eventually given up and left. Ash found the idea amusing and admitted that he had been desperate, as there were still so many things he wanted to accomplish. Folka reminded him that he still had work to do, which was precisely why he was heading to the city. Ash confirmed his resolve, and Folka firmly stated that quitting was not an option for him. Ash agreed and said that he should return to his reading. He added that if Folka sent him any letters while he was away, he would be sure to reply. Folka agreed to write to him, noting that it would give him something to do whenever he felt stuck with his work. Ash joked that one hardly needed an excuse like that to write a letter. As Folka stood up, he patted Ash on the head and told him to do his best. When Folka began to leave, Ash asked where he was going. Folka replied that he was going for a walk, explaining that it was good for the body to do so from time to time. Ash teased him by asking how a natural-born shut-in like Folka was suddenly going for a walk and what kind of cataclysm such a change might bring. Folka ignored the remark and suggested that they discuss decoding again the next time they met. Ash resolved to do his best and wished Folka the same.